Cass Reyes carried humanity's meanest animal into the Hall of Conquest, inside a blue plastic travel crate. The crate had air holes, a steel latch, and one warning sticker written in 12 trade languages. Every version said the same thing. Do not open without CASS. Alien honor guards watched it pass with disappointment. They had expected a terrestrial dragon, perhaps an armored reptile bred beneath Earth's radioactive deserts. The Varkan news channels had spent a week predicting a giant war beast. Artists imagined six-legged lions, venomous apes, and machines grown from predator bone. Instead, the human delegation brought luggage. Cass walked beside the crate in a plain brown field uniform. At 21, she was the youngest person in the delegation and the only one without ceremonial medal on her shoulders. Her black hair was braided close to her head. A fading scratch crossed one cheek. The crate bumped against her knee whenever the creature inside shifted impatiently. Ambassador Lion Akoro leaned toward her as they entered the main chamber. How is she? Offended by the music. Varkan war horns thundered from the upper galleries. I understand her position, the ambassador said. The Hall of Conquest had been built around an arena visible through a transparent floor. 10,000 delegates stood on terraces above black sand. War banners hung from the ceiling, each sewn with images of worlds Warlord Vorak Thane claimed to have defeated. At the far end, the warlord waited on a throne made from the ribs of something enormous. He was enormous too. Varkans carried 4 arms, 2 heavy legs, and a crown of backward-sweeping horns. Vorak's skin was the color of old iron. A gravity hammer rested across his lap. Scars divided his face into hard geometric shapes. Behind the throne rose a window overlooking space. His fleet surrounded the hall, 6,000 angular warships, each with weapons aimed outward at the representatives who had come to witness humanity's humiliation. The warlord looked at the travel crate. Is this deception? He asked. Ambassador Akoro stopped at the ceremonial line. You challenged humanity to answer your war serpent with the most dangerous animal Earth was willing to send. We have answered. Vorak's lower hands tightened on the throne. I asked for your meanest beast. Cass set the crate down. Something scratched the plastic from inside. You received her, she said. Translation repeated the statement through the hall. The upper galleries erupted in laughter. Varkan officers struck the rails. Alien delegates covered mouths, folded throat fans, or pulsed amusement colors. A commentator magnified the crate on every public screen. Its scuffed corners and hand-written feeding schedule appeared beside an image of the warlord's serpent. Azhara filled half the arena below. The war serpent was 180 meters long, plated in red-black armor, with a crown of sensory tendrils and a jaw built to crush assault vehicles. Chains as thick as Cass's torso anchored her to 6 towers. Each tower emitted green light into metal collars beneath her scales. She was not roaring. She lay curled around the arena's central pit, breathing too fast. Cass ignored the laughter and watched her. The animal in your crate weighs less than one of Azhara's teeth, Vorak said. Pepper weighs 11 kilograms, Cass replied. She considers that sufficient. The crate shook hard enough to move 3 centimeters. Ambassador Akoro kept his face still. You invoked the Covenant trial after attacking the neutral colony at Sable Reach. Under your own law, if humanity's chosen animal defeats the war serpent, your fleet withdraws and releases its prisoners. When the serpent devours your offering, Earth accepts Varkan rule across the Reach. Those are the terms you broadcast. Vorak smiled, then opened the crate, let the galaxy witness Earth's answer. Cass did not move. Not yet. The hall quieted. The warlord rose from his ribbed throne. You stand inside my fortress and delay my command. The Covenant grants 1 preparation cycle. For weapons and armor. Pepper brought both. The crate scratched again. Vorak descended the throne steps. What species is it? Mellivora capensis, honey badger. An alien archivist searched the public network. Images appeared above the hall. A compact black and gray mammal digging through stone-hard soil, fighting snakes, raiding hives, driving lions away from kills, and escaping enclosures designed by increasingly desperate human caretakers. The laughter became less confident. Cass opened the crate's water port and offered a metal bowl. A black nose appeared. Pepper sniffed the Varkan air, sneezed, and pulled the bowl inside with long, pale claws. She is not genetically modified, Cass said. She has no military implants, armor, toxin, or remote control. Vorak's amusement returned. You admit she is a common animal. There is nothing common about an animal that makes lions reconsider their schedule. This produced a few human smiles, but did not hide the problem. Pepper was clever, stubborn, resilient, and terrifying to anything that mistook size for surrender. She was not capable of killing a creature longer than a city block. Cass had no intention of asking her to try. The challenge began 3 weeks earlier when Vorak's fleet crossed into Sable Reach and destroyed its defense platforms. The colony belonged to no empire. Humans, Kelari, Celery, and 6 other species had built it together around a young star. Vorak claimed the system as ancestral Varkan territory and demanded tribute. Humanity refused. He could have launched a conventional war. Instead, he invoked an ancient covenant trial in front of every major galactic government. The law allowed a ruler to prove biological and military supremacy through representative beasts. Most civilizations considered the ritual obsolete. Vorak knew humans could not refuse without allowing him to call them cowards before undecided allies. Earth's military proposed robotic predators. Lawyers proposed challenging the law. A few generals suggested sending a tank and arguing that humans counted it as an animal. Cass watched the footage of Azhara. She saw the breathing, the fixed head position, and the way the serpent's tendrils recoiled whenever the control towers brightened. The animal did not serve Vorak. It feared him. Pepper watched the footage too, though she cared more about the fruit Cass was eating. The idea arrived somewhere between the serpent's flinch and the badger, stealing half a mango from Cass's hand. Humanity did not need an animal meaner than Azhara. It needed one mean enough to ignore the performance and attack whatever was actually causing the pain. The Terran Council approved the plan because every other option led directly to war. Cass received 27 pages of instructions. Pepper ate the corner of page 1. Now, inside Vorak's fortress, Cass used the preparation cycle to inspect the arena. The warlord allowed her onto a high-maintenance bridge above the sand, but refused access to Azhara's medical records. Varkan handlers stood beside the 6 control towers, each wearing shock armor. The serpent watched them rather than Cass. She has lesions beneath the collars, Cass said. Chief Handler Drosh, a narrow Varkan with one broken horn, blocked her scanner. Battle scars. Imperfect circles. The collars guide her strength. Pain guides panic. Those aren't the same thing. Drosh's upper lip lifted. Humans give animals names and imagine friendship. Azhara was hatched for conquest. Who hatched her? The Warlord's breeders. Cass had analyzed the serpent's tissue fragments from old battles. The growth patterns did not match artificial breeding. Azhara was at least 200 years old, perhaps 3. Varkan war records began using serpents only 70 years ago. Where are the other war serpents? She asked. Drosh pushed her back from the rail. Prepare your offering. Pepper growled inside the crate. The sound was small. Drosh looked down anyway. Cass smiled. She dislikes rude people. She spent the remainder of the cycle measuring arena vents, sand depth, temperature, and the control tower's pulse intervals. The Covenant prohibited weapons but allowed food, water, and species-specific handling equipment. Cass requested a shovel, 3 raw eggs, a coil of climbing rope, a ceramic bowl, and 2 kilograms of soil from Earth. Vorak approved the list after deciding it could not matter. Cass mixed the soil into one corner of Pepper's preparation pen. Earth scent settled over the metal floor. Pepper rolled in it, dug once, and finally relaxed enough to eat. Ambassador Okoro waited outside the pen. Tell me again why the badger does not simply attack the first moving thing. Because that's a story people tell about fearless animals. Pepper calculates. She just accepts risks most creatures reject. Will she understand the serpent is not the target? She'll understand the control collars smell like the restraint devices we trained with. The towers use a stimulant compound derived from arachnid venom. Honey badgers recognize venom and distressed predators. Recognize is not rescue. No. Then what makes you think she will help? Cass watched Pepper excavate the egg she had buried 10 seconds earlier. I don't. She gets a choice too. The ambassador studied her. Humanity's fate may depend on an animal's mood. Humanity's fate depends on Vorak believing everything alive can be controlled. Pepper is the argument against that. The preparation cycle ended. Arena gates opened. Cass carried the crate down a tunnel beneath the Hall of Conquest. The roar of 10,000 spectators vibrated through the walls. Pepper paced inside, excited by unfamiliar scent. She had worked on wildlife rescues, tracked burrowing animals, and once driven a pair of armed smugglers out of a storage shed. She had never seen a war serpent. No animal had. Cass stopped before the final gate and crouched beside the crate. You find the bad smell, she said. You break what makes it, then you come back. Pepper pressed her nose to an air hole. No heroics, that's my department. The badger huffed. I know, hypocrite. The arena announcer introduced Azhara with a list of conquered worlds. The serpent's collars flashed. She lifted her head and roared on command. The sound rolled through Cass's bones. Pepper stopped pacing. For the first time since leaving Earth, she became completely still. Cass smelled the serpent through the gate, musk, hot metal, blood, and the sharp chemical trace of the control venom. Pepper smelled it too. Her claws flexed against the crate floor. That's the bad smell. The human gate opened. Every screen in the hall magnified the blue crate. Cass walked 20 meters onto the black sand and set it down. Covenant officials ordered her to leave the arena. The handler may release the beast, she said. The law doesn't specify distance. Vorak's voice boomed from above. Remain if you wish to die beside it. Cass knelt and opened the latch. Pepper emerged nose first. She was low to the ground, gray across the back and black beneath, with loose skin and pale claws built for tearing hard earth. She looked around the enormous arena, smelled the sand, and shook dust from one paw. Azhara raised her head. One amber eye was larger than Pepper's entire body. The audience laughed again. Pepper looked up at the serpent. Then she looked at Cass. Don't start with me, Cass said. Pepper trotted toward the nearest control tower. The laughter stopped. Chief Handler Drosh activated a command. Azhara's collars burned green. The serpent uncoiled, armor plates grinding together. Her head descended toward the badger. Pepper kept moving. She did not charge the serpent. She zigzagged through the sand, following the chemical scent. Azhara struck. The jaws hit where Pepper had been and threw black sand across the arena. Pepper rolled with the impact wave, disappeared in the cloud, and emerged beneath the serpent's chin. Cass's pulse hammered, left Pepper. The badger ignored her and went right. A second strike missed by less than a meter. Alien delegates rose from their seats. Commentators stopped joking. Pepper moved inside the serpent's turning radius, too small and close for the giant head to track easily. She reached the first tower and smelled its base. A cable carried green fluid from the tower into Azhara's collar. Pepper bit it. The tube ruptured. Control venom sprayed across the sand. Azhara screamed. One collar went dark. The serpent's next strike was slower. Pepper grabbed the broken cable and pulled, bracing all 4 feet. The connector tore free from the collar. Beneath it, a nest of pale worm-like organisms writhed inside Azhara's scales. Cass had expected electrodes. She had not expected parasites. The worms carried the control compound directly into the serpent's nerves. They were alive, genetically tuned and frightened by the badger's scent. Pepper recognized prey. She climbed Azhara's neck. The serpent thrashed. Chains snapped tight. Pepper hooked claws between armor plates and bit the parasite cluster. Her thick, loose skin absorbed impacts that would have broken a rigid body. Azhara tried to crush her against the tower, but Pepper crawled beneath a scale. Chief Handler Dross shouted commands. The remaining collars brightened. Azhara's head turned toward Cass. The Warlord had changed targets. Cass ran. The serpent struck the human preparation gate, shredding metal. Cass dove beneath the jaw as it swept over her. One sensory tendril caught her ankle and lifted her from the sand. Pepper heard her shout. The badger emerged from beneath the scale with a parasite in her teeth. She dropped onto Azhara's snout and bit the nearest tendril. The grip on Cass released. She hit the ground hard enough to lose breath. Pepper stood between Azhara's eyes, fur raised, parasite blood around her mouth. The war serpent could have snapped her body with one movement. Instead, Azhara froze. The badger smelled the inflamed tissue around the nearest collar. She dug her claws beneath its edge. The serpent lowered her head to the sand. Pepper pulled. Azhara pressed sideways, using the ground against the metal. Together they tore the collar open. The audience made no sound. Humanity's 11-kilogram animal had not defeated the war serpent. She had shown the serpent who the real enemy was. Vorak Thane reacted the way rulers react when a symbol stops obeying. He struck the command panel beside his throne. All 5 remaining control towers discharged at once. Green light ran through Azhara's collars. The parasite nests released fresh venom into her nerves. Her head snapped upward. Pepper lost her grip and tumbled down the armored neck. Cass ran beneath her. She caught Pepper against her chest, turned, and took the fall across one shoulder. The badger twisted immediately, trying to return to the serpent. Cass held the loose skin behind her neck. Easy. Pepper snarled at the towers. I agree, still easy. Azhara convulsed. One chain tore free from its anchor and swept across the arena, cutting a control tower in half. Varkan handlers scattered. The audience surged toward exits, but fortress shutters sealed the galleries. The Covenant judge, an elderly Kalari with a shell of blue plates, rose from the ceremonial platform. Warlord Thane, halt the trial. Your control apparatus violates the prohibition on external weapons. Vorak lifted his gravity hammer. The serpent's harness is traditional handling equipment. It contains living coercion organisms. Then they are part of the beast. Cass heard the lie enter the public record. Every delegate heard it too. Ambassador Akoro stepped beside the judge. The Warlord has admitted biological modification and external control. Under Covenant law, humanity wins by disqualification. Withdraw from Sable Reach. Vorak smiled. The 6,000 warships outside turned their weapons inward toward the hall. No one withdraws until my serpent eats, he said. Azhara's jaws opened above Cass. Pepper fought the restraint in her arms. Cass set her down, not because the arena was safe, but because holding the badger would only give both of them fewer options. "Second tower," she said. Pepper sprinted. Cass ran the opposite direction. Azhara followed the larger target. Her head struck the sand behind Cass, close enough that the pressure wave lifted the human off her feet. Cass rolled through broken cable and came up beside the central pit. The pit was covered by an armored grate. Something moved beneath it. Not machinery. Several smaller serpents pressed pale snouts through the openings. Young. Vorak had hidden Azhara's offspring directly beneath the arena. Cass understood the control system's second layer. Pain could force movement, but hostages made obedience last between shocks. "There are juveniles under the floor," she shouted. Arena cameras turned toward the pit. Chief Handler Drosh rushed to block them. Pepper reached the second tower and vanished into its maintenance opening. The tower's light flickered. Azhara struck again. Cass jumped onto the armored grate. The serpent stopped with her jaws less than a meter away. She could not crush the human without crushing the young beneath her. Her tendrils touched the grate. Small snouts reached toward them. The green collars flashed. Azhara screamed but refused the command. One tower went dark. Pepper emerged carrying another pale parasite. She killed it with one shake and raced toward the next cable. Drosh drew a pulse pistol. Cass saw him aim at the badger. She threw the ceramic food bowl from Pepper's equipment. It struck his wrist as he fired. The pulse missed Pepper and burned through a chain anchor. Azhara's third restraint snapped. The serpent turned on Drosh. He activated a handheld controller. Every juvenile beneath the grate cried out. Azhara stopped. "The young are implanted," Cass said. Drosh backed toward a handler gate, controller held above his head. "Order your animal into the serpent's mouth." Pepper doesn't take orders well. The badger bit through the third cable. Drosh pressed the controller. A juvenile convulsed. Azhara lowered her head in submission. Cass moved toward him. "Stay back. You told the galaxy she was hatched for conquest." "She was." "Then why hide her children?" "Breeding assets require protection." "That's not what she thinks they are." Drosh pointed the pistol at Cass. "Your species confuses attachment with intelligence. Your species confuses fear with loyalty." He fired. Cass dropped behind a broken chain anchor. Pepper abandoned the tower and charged the handler. 11 kilograms of badger hit his lower leg. Her claws found the seam between armor plates. Drosh shouted and tried to kick her away. Loose skin turned in his grip while Pepper's body kept biting in another direction. He lost the pistol. Cass crossed the distance and tackled his upper legs. They fell together. The controller skidded across the sand. Pepper released Drosh and chased it. One of the handler's lower hands caught her tail. Pepper turned inside her own skin and bit his fingers. He released everything. She seized the controller, dug beneath the armored grate, and disappeared into the juvenile pit. "Pepper!" Cass pushed Drosh's face into the sand and looked through the opening. Darkness swallowed the badger. Juvenile serpents moved below, each as long as a ground vehicle. Their collars flashed green. Azhara watched the pit. The warlord shouted for his guards to enter the arena. The Covenant judge blocked the security gate with his own body. Alien delegates joined him. What began as witnesses standing behind law became a physical barrier of diplomats, scientists, and minor rulers refusing to let Vorak erase what they had seen. "Move," a Varkan commander ordered. The judge spread all 6 arms. "Your warlord invoked the Covenant before the galaxy. He will not replace it with murder when the result displeases him." Weapons rose on both sides. Ambassador Okoro opened a direct channel to Earth's fleet. "Trial conditions have collapsed. Prepare defensive action." The Terran ships were hidden beyond the system's fold boundary, far enough to honor the ritual and close enough to hear the ambassador. They could not reach the arena before Varkan troops did. Cass searched for another way into the juvenile pit. The central grate had 8 locking bars, each designed to hold Azhara's full weight. The broken control tower's cable ran beneath it. Cass followed the cable to a maintenance hatch, used Drosh's dropped pistol to melt the lock, and climbed down. Heat and musk filled the chamber. 7 juvenile serpents occupied separate restraint channels. Parasite collars had been installed before their armor hardened. Some lesions had grown over the metal. One young serpent lay motionless except for rapid breathing. Pepper was inside its restraint channel. The badger had ignored the terrified jaws and climbed directly onto the collar. She dug at the parasite nest while the juvenile twisted. A tooth caught Pepper's shoulder and threw her against the wall. Cass reached her. Blood darkened the gray fur, but the injury looked shallow. "You found the bitey end," Cass said. Pepper got up and went back. The controller lay crushed beneath her claws. Collar pulses continued from the tower network. Cass opened her field kit. The Covenant prohibited weapons, not veterinary tools. She carried sealant, cutters, a scanner, and a venom response injector formulated for Pepper. She scanned the juvenile's collar. Living tendrils entered the superficial nerves. Pulling them would cause damage, but cutting their nutrient line might make them release. Pepper had already found the line by smell. "Here," Cass said, guiding the badger's nose toward a blue membrane. Pepper bit. The parasite recoiled. Cass cut the tendrils as they withdrew. The collar opened. The juvenile stopped convulsing. It stared at Cass and Pepper. "1," Cass said, 6 to go. Above them, Azhara struck the arena floor in a repeating sequence. The vibrations traveled through the restraint channels. Each juvenile answered with its own pattern. The motionless one did not. Cass and Pepper worked through the cells. Pepper located the living lines. Cass cut only after the parasites loosened. The second juvenile tried to bite the badger. Pepper bit its lip first, not hard enough to injure, only enough to establish that size did not settle every disagreement. The juvenile withdrew in visible confusion. "Diplomatic," Cass told her. Pepper sneezed serpent musk into Cass's face. At the 4th collar, Varkan troops entered the chamber. Chief Handler Drosh had recovered. Blood marked his fingers, and fury replaced every trace of professional control. 6 armored guards followed him through the service passage. "Kill the human," he said. "Preserve the animal." Cass looked at Pepper. "You heard the nice man." The badger's fur rose. The guards advanced between restraint channels. Cass opened the nearest juvenile gate. The freed serpent did not attack. It recoiled from the weapons, pressing against the wall. The second freed juvenile moved beside it. Their bodies blocked the narrow passage. Drosh activated a backup pulse. The remaining collars flashed. The freed juveniles smelled the chemical and panicked. One struck a guard with its tail. Another coiled around a support beam. Pepper disappeared beneath the grated walkway. The first guard passed above her. She erupted between his feet, climbed his armor, and bit through the cable feeding his communication unit. Static filled every Varkan helmet. Cass threw a sealant canister at the overhead lights. White foam expanded across sensors and plunged the chamber into darkness. Human vision adjusted faster than Varkan compound eyes. Cass moved. She cut the 5th collar, rolled under a pulse shot, and opened the gate. A juvenile surged into the passage. Guards scattered. Pepper followed the scent of Drosh's bitten hand through the dark. He shouted once. His pistol fired into the ceiling. Emergency lights returned. Drosh stood on the service ladder with Pepper attached to his upper arm. He slammed her against the wall. The badger released before impact, landed on a pipe, and came at him again. Cass freed the sixth juvenile. The seventh lay silent at the far end. Its collar had cut too deeply. Green fluid leaked beneath translucent young scales. The scanner showed failing nerve signals and weak heart contractions. Cass knelt beside it. "Pepper here." The badger abandoned Drosh and followed her voice. Together they opened the collar. The parasite tendrils had fused to the tissue. Cass injected a stabilizer meant for terrestrial reptiles. It would not cure the damage, but the basic electrolyte balance was close enough to support the heart. The juvenile took one breath. Then another. Azhara struck the floor above. The young serpent answered faintly. The mother roared. Drosh reached the emergency controls and initiated pit sterilization. Red lights filled the chamber. Vents opened along the walls. Cass smelled fuel. "He would burn his breeding assets," she said. Drosh stood behind the closing service hatch. "There will be other serpents." The words reached Azhara through the arena microphones. Her remaining collars flashed. She tore through the floor. The giant head broke the central grate and plunged into the juvenile chamber. Armor folded. Stone split. One tusk blocked the service hatch before it sealed, trapping Drosh inside with the creatures he considered replaceable. Azhara smelled each young serpent. She reached the injured one and became still. Cass expected rage. The mother used her tendrils to lift the juvenile and place it against the warm tissue beneath her jaw. She released a vibration so low that Cass felt it through the soles of her boots. The young heart steadied. Pepper climbed onto Azhara's snout and sat there, bleeding but unafraid. The mother did not shake her off. Above them, 3 control towers remained active. Azhara looked toward the warlord's throne. The trial was over. The reckoning had begun. Azhara lifted her head through the broken arena floor. Pepper rode between her sensory tendrils, claws hooked into an armor seam. Cass stayed below with the injured juvenile. The other young serpents coiled around their sibling, forming a living wall against the Varkan guards. Chief Handler Drosh crawled toward the service hatch. One juvenile placed its tail across his legs. He stopped. "They learn quickly," Cass said. Drosh stared at her. "You have destroyed the discipline of 70 years. You had 70 years and never earned one animal's loyalty." Above, Azhara turned toward the throne. Warlord Vorak did not wait for her. He struck his gravity hammer against the floor, activating a personal shield, and withdrew through the royal gate. Elite guards sealed it behind him. The ribbed throne remained beneath the serpent's shadow. Alien delegates filled the galleries. Some fled, others recorded. The Covenant judge stood at the ceremonial rail while armed Varkans surrounded him. "The trial is decided," he announced. Humanity's representative disabled the warlord's external control and secured the surrender of the opposing beast. Vorak Thane must withdraw from Sable Reach. A Varkan commander aimed at him. The warlord recognizes no result. Ambassador Okoro stepped in front of the judge. Then he recognizes no covenant protection. Every government present is free to treat his fleet as a pirate force. The commander hesitated. That was why Vorak had staged the trial. His empire relied on old treaties when convenient and raw force when treaties resisted him. Rejecting the judgment in front of 10,000 witnesses stripped legitimacy from every conquest based on the same law. Outside, Varkan fleet captains began asking whether the withdrawal order was valid. Vorak answered by firing on one of his own ships. The destroyed cruiser had requested confirmation twice. Its debris crossed the hall's great window. 6,000 crews saw what questions cost. The fleet turned weapons toward Sable Reach. "He is starting the invasion," Okoro said over Cass's comm. "Terran forces are entering the system. Can you get the animals out of the arena?" Cass looked at the injured juvenile. Its heart remained unstable and the sterilization vents were still opening, working on it. Azhara may be the only force inside this station, capable of breaking the royal defenses. She's not a force, she's a mother with 7 injured young. Understood. The ambassador meant it, he did not ask again. Cass searched the chamber map. The juvenile pit connected to breeding laboratories, feeding bays, and a launch tunnel large enough for Azhara. Every exit contained control gates. The main launch tunnel opened into a fortified hangar on the station's underside. Drash, disable the sterilization and open the launch tunnel. The handler remained beneath the juvenile's tail. Kill me. That isn't what I asked. Without the Warlord, worlds fracture. Billions die in succession wars. You think keeping him powerful prevents death? It gives death one direction. Cass understood the logic. A tyrant convinced followers that his violence was the wall holding back worse violence. People reinforced the wall until they could no longer imagine open ground. Help the animals leave, she said. Then you can decide what kind of world comes next instead of letting Vorak decide for you. Drash looked toward Azhara's injured young. His face changed when the juvenile released a weak call. I installed that collar, he said. Then begin there. The juvenile lifted its tail enough for him to move. Drash entered the shutdown code. Sterilization vents closed. The launch tunnel opened on the chamber's far side. Varkan guards lowered their weapons as the handler walked among the juveniles and removed the backup transmitters from their collars. Why are they obeying you now? Cass asked. They are not. He kept his hands visible and waited for each serpent to smell him before approaching. One refused. He stepped away. I am attempting something unfamiliar, he said. Respect. Uncertainty. It was a start. Pepper returned through the broken floor carrying a strip of green control cable. She dropped onto Cass's shoulders, climbed down the front of her uniform, and stole one of the raw eggs from the field pouch. Cass checked the wound beneath the badger's fur, shallow as she had hoped. She applied sealant while Pepper ate. You did well. Pepper tried to take a second egg. That wasn't a payment schedule. The badger took it anyway. Azhara lowered her head into the juvenile chamber. Her tendrils touched Cass, Pepper, and each young serpent in sequence. When she reached Drash, she struck the floor hard enough to knock him down but did not bite. He accepted the judgment without moving. The injured juvenile could not travel independently. Azhara opened a flexible throat pouch beneath her jaw, an adaptation Cass had mistaken for armor. She lifted the young animal inside and sealed the pouch around it. The other 6 followed the launch tunnel. Cass and Pepper walked with them. The tunnel walls displayed murals of war serpents burning cities. Azhara smelled one image and scraped it away with a tusk. Beneath the paint lay older carvings, serpents coiled around stars, carrying small figures through storms. The species had not begun as weapons. Varkan rulers had rewritten rescue into conquest. Drash stopped beside the carving. The oldest songs call them sky guides. I thought it was metaphor. Powerful people love calling history metaphor when the real version is inconvenient. They reached the feeding bay. Thousands of empty bone racks lined the walls. A live cargo pen held herd animals intended for the serpents. Cass opened it. The creatures fled into maintenance corridors. Pepper chased one for 3 steps before Cass called her back. Professional standards. Pepper looked deeply unconvinced. The launch hangar opened ahead. Vorak had anticipated them. Heavy walkers formed 3 firing lines around the exit. Their weapons were not aimed at Azhara's head. They targeted the throat pouch carrying her injured young. The warlord appeared on a high command balcony. Return to restraint, he ordered, or the offspring dies. Azhara stopped. Drash went pale. He knows the pouch position. Can she armor it? Cass asked. Not against Walker cannons. Vorak's image filled the hangar. Human handler, you have mistaken temporary confusion for freedom. Every creature submits when the correct life is threatened. Cass looked at the Walker formation, hangar doors, fuel lines, and overhead service tracks. Pepper looked at a drainage grate. Don't, Cass whispered. The Badger entered it. She vanished before anyone else noticed. Cass stepped in front of Azhara. The Covenant says you lost. The Covenant is a story weak rulers tell strong ones. Then why did you need the trial? Vorak's upper hands tightened around his hammer. Because conquest is cheaper when victims admire it. The statement went out on every public channel. Delegates who had remained neutral began ordering their fleets away from Varkan command zones. Sable Reach activated its defense network. Vorak's empire did not collapse in one moment, but the first cracks became visible. He realized the microphone was still live and cut the feed. Walker cannons charged. Cass raised both empty hands. Azhara can't surrender. She doesn't understand your command. Let me approach the restraint platform. Drosh whispered. She understands him perfectly. I know. Cass walked toward the center of the hangar, drawing targeting sensors away from the throat pouch. Azhara remained behind her, coiled around the juveniles. The restraint platform had a command console connected to every walker. Cass needed to reach it, but two armored officers blocked the route. Stop, one said. Cass stopped. Above them, something clanged inside the service track. Pepper emerged on the overhead crane. The Badger had followed the drainage network into the hangar's maintenance spine. She ran along a narrow beam 30 meters above the floor, carrying a severed cable in her mouth. At the crane's center, she began digging into the soft insulation around its power coupler. Vorak's guards looked up. Cass moved. She swept one officer's leg and shoved the other into the restraint platform. Drosh disabled a walker's targeting lock with his old handler code. Azhara struck the floor, sending a vibration through the hangar. The juvenile spread into maintenance shadows. Pepper bit through the crane coupler. The overhead cargo frame dropped. It landed between Azhara and the walkers, a wall of steel designed to lift War Serpent armor. Cannons fired. The frame absorbed the first volley. Molten fragments filled the hangar. Cass reached the command console. Her access failed. Drosh threw her his handler key. The walkers share the restraint network. Cass inserted it. The console offered command options for pain, feeding, sleep, aggression, and termination. No setting allowed simple release. She chose maintenance. Every walker's armor opened for diagnostic inspection. Azhara surged forward. She did not crush the exposed crews. Her tendrils tore targeting modules from the machines. Juveniles wrapped around walker legs and pulled them off balance. Drosh shouted for the crews to evacuate. Some obeyed, others kept firing manually. Pepper descended the crane cable onto the command balcony. Vorak saw her too late. The Badger landed on his ceremonial mantle and climbed toward the hand holding the gravity hammer. The Warlord roared. 4 hands tried to catch one small body. Pepper twisted through his grip, bit the hammer's activation cable, and ran between his legs. The weapon discharged into the balcony floor. Gravity reversed. Vorak, his guards, and the ribbed command chair rose toward the ceiling. The Warlord flailed for support. Pepper hooked her claws into the floor and remained exactly where she wanted to be. Cass reached the balcony stairs as emergency gravity returned. Vorak crashed onto the broken throne. Pepper stood on his chest. The Warlord stared at the 11-kilogram animal humanity had sent to answer his serpent. Remove it, he gasped. Cass climbed the final step, asked nicely. Vorak did not ask. His lower right hand closed around Pepper's body. The badger's loose skin twisted inside his grip. Before she could turn and bite, he threw her across the balcony. Cass caught her against the rail. The warlord rolled from the broken throne and struck Cass with the back of one armored hand. She hit the deck. Pepper landed beside her and immediately tried to charge again. Vorak activated a disc beneath his chest plate. A pressure wave crossed the balcony. Pepper flattened, claws scraping uselessly across metal. Azhara screamed in the hangar below. Every serpent, adult and juvenile, pressed to the floor. "Dominance field," Drosh shouted. "The throne carries the master frequency." The device did not use the collars. It stimulated the species' deepest threat response through sound too low for most delegates to hear. Cass felt it in her ribs. Pepper felt it through every bone. The badger's legs shook. She stood anyway. Vorak looked down at her. "Why does it still move?" "Honey badgers evolved around things bigger than them," Cass said. "Fear is information, not an order." Pepper advanced one step at a time. The warlord increased the field. Serpent armor struck the floor. Juveniles cried out. Azhara tried to raise her head and failed. Pepper kept moving. Her nose followed the device beneath Vorak's chest plate. Cass recognized the same behavior she had seen in the arena. Pepper was not fighting the biggest creature. She was hunting the source of the bad sensation. Vorak raised a boot. Cass lunged and caught his leg. The kick passed above Pepper. She climbed the other boot, reached the lower edge of the armor, and disappeared beneath the warlord's mantle. Vorak roared. 4 hands slapped at his own chest. Pepper bit the device cable. The dominance field stuttered. Azhara lifted her head. Pepper bit again. The field stopped. The war serpent struck the command balcony. Her tusk tore through the outer rail between Vorak and Cass. The floor tilted. The warlord fell toward the hangar, caught a hanging cable, and swung above his damaged walkers. Cass grabbed Pepper and the remaining rail. Azhara held the broken balcony with one tendril, preventing it from falling on the juveniles. Her amber eye centered on Cass. "Thank you," Cass said, unsure whether the words mattered. The serpent lowered the balcony to the floor. Vorak used the distraction. He climbed the cable, entered an armored escape lift, and sealed it before Varro's former handlers could reach him. The lift rose toward the royal dock. "He is fleeing to the Crown of Ash," Drosh said. "His flagship. His brood vault." The distinction carried more fear than the word flagship. Drosh opened a restricted map. A moon-sized station orbited the system's outer gas giant. Varkan histories called it the Crown of Ash, birthplace of every war serpent in Imperial service. Its public records described artificial hatcheries. The private handler network showed hundreds of captured eggs and 43 juvenile serpents in control training. "Azhara's original brood is there," he said. "The 7 below were produced after the warlord brought her to the hall." "Produced?" Drosh looked ashamed. "Her eggs were taken during dormancy. We told ourselves the hatcheries preserved the species." "You preserved hostages." The royal dock opened. Vorak's command ship launched toward the gas giant. Outside the hall, Varkan fleets split. Some followed him. Others held position. 3 squadrons turned their weapons away from Sable Reach and broadcast neutrality. The captain whose cruiser had been destroyed had relatives across the fleet. Questions spread faster than threats could stop them. Terran ships entered the system in a crescent formation. They did not fire. Earth Admiral Hana Cho transmitted the Covenant judgment, Vorak's public confession, and an offer of safe withdrawal to every Varkan crew. "Any vessel that attacks civilian worlds will be disabled," she said. "Any vessel that stands down keeps its crew and receives fuel for the journey home. Choose before your warlord chooses for you." Hundreds powered down. Vorak ordered the Crown of Ash to activate brood termination. Every Serpent collar in the system began a 15-minute countdown. Azhara heard the signal. She turned toward the hangar's space doors and struck them. "Those doors open into vacuum," Cass said. Drosh checked the old carvings, sky guides. The murals showed serpents coiled around stars, because the image was literal. Adult war serpents had evolved in the upper atmosphere of Varka's gas giant, migrating between dense moons through vacuum. The species could seal respiratory openings and survive short periods in space. The Varkans had built war machines around a natural ability they did not understand. "Open the doors," Cass said. "The juveniles cannot survive exposure." "Can Azhara?" Drosh looked at the serpent. "The old songs say yes." "Then give her the choice." They evacuated the hangar crews and moved the juveniles behind pressure shields. Cass took Pepper into the control room. Azhara waited before the doors, her armor plates sealing along the body. Membranes covered her eyes. The throat pouch tightened around the injured young. Drosh hesitated over the command. "I spent my life closing gates around her," he said. "Open one." The space doors parted. Air rushed from the hangar. Loose equipment vanished into the stars. Azhara anchored herself until pressure equalized, then uncoiled through the opening. She entered space. For several seconds the giant serpent drifted beside the Hall of Conquest. Then armor fins unfolded along her body. Charged particles from the station's field flowed across them. Azhara moved, not with engines but with long waves of muscle guiding the captured energy. She accelerated toward the gas giant. Every screen in the hall showed the ancient sky guide returning to the sky. Pepper pressed her paws against the control room window. "No," Cass told her, "you are not going outside." The badger scratched the glass. "Still no." Ambassador Akaro joined them. "Admiral Cho can transport you to the Crown. She requests any handler who understands the control system." Drosh volunteered. Cass did too. "Your part of the Covenant trial is complete," the ambassador said. Pepper's part was finding the real target. The real target is still transmitting. The Crown is defended by Vorak's loyal fleet. Then she'll have plenty to dislike. Pepper chattered inside Cass's arms as if agreeing. Akaro looked at the badger's torn shoulder. "Is she fit to continue?" Cass scanned the wound. The sealant held. Pepper had eaten 2 eggs, stolen a third from Drosh's pocket, and was currently trying to chew through the ambassador's formal sash. "Unfortunately, yes." They boarded a Terran rescue cutter with Drosh, the Covenant judge, and a mixed medical team. Admiral Cho refused to place soldiers aboard because Vorak would describe any breach of the Crown as invasion. The judge carried legal authority. Drosh carried access. Cass carried Pepper. Azhara traveled ahead of them. Varkan loyalists fired on her. The first beam struck the Serpent's flank and scattered across heat-resistant armor. The second burned a groove between plates. Azhara coiled around a patrol ship, not crushing it, using the hull as cover while her tendrils tore away its weapon array. The crew ejected. She released the disabled vessel. "She is applying the same restraint Pepper showed," Drosh said. "Pepper bit 3 people. By Varkan standards, remarkable restraint." The badger slept through the exchange, curled in Cass's lap. The crown of ash rose beyond the gas giant's rings. It was not moon-sized by construction. It was a hollowed natural moon. Its surface opened into vast red-lit chambers. Hundreds of serpent pens lined the equator. Chain structures extended into space like ribs. A central beacon pulsed the green termination code. Vorak's command ship entered the royal dock. The countdown reached 9 minutes. Admiral Cho engaged loyalist vessels at the edge of the moon. Terran ships used precision fields to disable engines and weapons, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Neutral Varkan captains watched, uncertain which side would survive. The rescue cutter followed Azhara toward a maintenance aperture. The war serpent struck the moon's outer chains. They tightened around her body. Crown handlers had prepared for returning adults. Green current traveled through the restraints. Azhara thrashed, unable to reach the beacon. "Can we disable the chains from inside?" Cass asked. Drosh projected the moon plan. "Manual controls are in the royal dock. Vorak will hold them." Another route. The handler studied the map. Small ventilation tunnels crossed between the maintenance aperture and beacon core. They were too narrow for a Varkan, human, or military drone. Cass looked at Pepper. The badger opened one eye. "I know," Cass said. "Everyone is surprised." The cutter docked under fire. Cass placed Pepper at the ventilation entrance. She clipped a small camera to the badger's harness and opened a scent capsule containing the control parasite sample. Pepper became fully awake. "Find the bad smell, break it, come back." The badger entered the moon. 8 minutes remained. Pepper's camera showed metal, darkness, and brief pieces of her own nose. She moved through the ventilation tunnel at a speed no careful reconnaissance drone would have attempted. The camera struck walls, rolled sideways, and filled with fur whenever she squeezed beneath a divider. Cass followed the signal on her wrist display while the rescue team entered the Crown's maintenance ring. The moon vibrated with serpent distress. Young animals called behind pressure doors. Control parasites answered through green conduits. Each pulse made Azhara's chains tighten outside. The termination countdown appeared on every wall. 7 minutes. Drosh opened the first maintenance barrier. 2 Varkan guards waited behind it. He raised all 4 hands. "The Covenant judges present, stand aside." "The Warlord has declared the judge compromised," one guard said. The elderly Kalari stepped forward. "A ruler cannot unmake law by insulting the witness." "He can unmake you." The guard fired. The judge's shell absorbed the pulse, but the impact drove him backward. Cass threw herself behind a conduit. Drosh rushed the shooter before a second shot. His broken horn struck the guard's chest. The medical team stunned the other. "Are you injured?" Cass asked the judge. A smoking mark crossed his blue shell. "Only offended." They continued. Pepper reached a junction. 4 tunnels carried the parasite scent. She chose the narrowest, climbed a vertical grill, and emerged above a hatchery. Rows of translucent eggs hung in artificial gravity fields. Some contained coiled embryos. Others had opened into shallow pens where newly hatched serpents wore collars before their eyes fully cleared. Workers in gray armor loaded eggs into armored cases. Vorak intended to evacuate the brood before killing every living serpent left behind. Pepper smelled the cases. One handler noticed movement in the vent and raised a capture pole. The badger backed away. The handler opened the grill. Pepper seized the pole, pulled him off balance, and ran between his legs into the hatchery. Alarms changed pitch. "She left the vent," Cass said. Drosh watched the feed. "Why?" "Because someone opened a door." Pepper vanished beneath an egg rack. 6 handlers searched from opposite sides. The badger climbed the support frame, crossed above them, and dropped into an armored transport case. Its lid sealed automatically. Cass lost the camera signal. "Pepper." No response but static. The case began, moving toward the royal dock. Cass marked its tracker. "She's being transported to Vorak." Then she found a route closer to the beacon, the judge said. "That was not the plan." "Does your animal often honor plans?" "She honors the important half. Find the bad smell, break it." Coming back was always negotiable. The rescue team reached a split. One corridor led to chain controls. Another led to the royal dock and Pepper's moving case. Cass stopped. Azhara's countdown showed 5 minutes, 40 seconds. Releasing her could save hundreds of serpents. Following Pepper might save one badger and interrupt the beacon if she reached it. Drosh placed his handler key in Cass's hand. Take the dock route. I will free Azhara. Vorak's people know your access. Then I will practice uncertainty. The judge and 2 medics went with Drosh toward chain control. Cass took the remaining doctor and a young Kelari legal aide named Siva toward the royal dock. The crown's inner chambers revealed the machinery behind Varkan mythology. Murals showed warlords receiving obedient serpents as divine gifts. Hidden doors behind the murals opened into parasite nurseries, pain calibration rooms, and disposal chutes filled with broken collars. The Empire had converted cruelty into tradition and hidden the maintenance costs. Cass recorded everything. Vorak broadcast from the royal dock. Varkan captains, humanity has infected the sacred brood with disorder. The Covenant failed because weak species fear our unity. Fire on the Terran fleet. Prove loyalty. Admiral Cho transmitted the live hatchery footage in response. Newborn serpents convulsed beneath collars while Vorak's handlers packed eggs for escape. Neutral Varkan crews watched both messages. One loyalist destroyer powered down. Vorak ordered its captain's family detained. 3 more ships switched sides. The fleet battle changed. Varkan vessels began shielding Terran rescue ships from former allies. Some captains refused to choose a political side but opened evacuation routes around the crown. The warlord's certainty could not survive thousands of people making separate decisions. Cass reached the dock observation level. Vorak's command ship waited below. Egg cases rolled into its cargo bay. The case carrying Pepper joined the line. The termination beacon stood behind the ship, a tower of living green tissue wrapped around an armored core. Parasite tendrils entered every control cable. Destroying the core would stop the countdown but release a shock through all connected collars. The parasites had to be disconnected in sequence. "Can you shut it down?" Cass asked the medical officer. He scanned from the balcony. "With 3 hours and a laboratory. We have 4 minutes. Then my professional recommendation is panic." Siva pointed to the egg transports. "The cases use independent life support. If we trigger a contamination alarm, the dock will quarantine them instead of loading them." "Do it." The legal aide accessed the shipping network and changed one environmental reading. Red lights flashed across the cargo line. Armored cases locked in place. Vorak's crew tried to override the quarantine. Inside Pepper's case, life support vents opened. The camera signal returned. Pepper smelled the airflow, found the vent seam and began digging. Cass searched for a way down. Royal guards protected both stairs. A cargo crane crossed the upper dock above the beacon. Its operator booth stood empty during quarantine. They entered the booth and moved the crane over the egg cases. Cass lowered the magnetic lift onto Pepper's container. Guards noticed as the case rose. Pulse fire struck the crane arm. Cass swung the case toward the observation balcony. The magnet failed 1 meter short. The container fell, hit the rail, and split open. Pepper emerged furious. "Come here." The badger ignored Cass and ran back along the broken crane arm toward the beacon. "Of course." Cass followed. The arm swayed above the dock. Pulse rounds burned holes behind her. Siva used the crane booth to swing a second cargo line between the shooters and the human. The medical officer remained behind the console, continuing to recommend panic. Pepper reached the beacon housing. The living tissue smelled like every control parasite at once. She sank her claws into it and climbed. The beacon reacted. Tendrils snapped toward her, one wrapped around her hind leg. Pepper turned and bit it. Green fluid sprayed. Another caught her harness and pulled her against the core. Cass jumped from the crane. She caught the outer frame, climbed down, and cut the tendril with her field blade. Pepper dropped into her arms, twisted free, and climbed again. "I came all this way to carry you back." Pepper chewed through another nerve line. The countdown paused at 2 minutes, 57 seconds. Then it resumed faster. "We triggered emergency termination," the medical officer said over comms. 90 seconds. The beacon core opened. Dozens of parasite bundles withdrew from the outer tissue and sealed behind armor. Pepper scratched at the closing plates. Cass saw a maintenance aperture no wider than her forearm. Can she reach the inside? If she enters before it seals? Cass looked at Pepper. The badger smelled the aperture and tried to enter without prompting. "Wait." For once, Pepper did. Cass removed the camera harness before it could catch, checked the wound seal, and touched her forehead to the small gray head. "Bad smell, break it, come back." Pepper entered the living beacon. Armor closed behind her. Cass lost every signal. 70 seconds. Outside the moon, Azhara's chains released. Drosh had reached the manual controls. The adult serpent tore free and struck the crown's equatorial armor. Her tendrils found the brood vault. She began peeling open the moon. Vorak ran from his command ship toward the beacon platform. His gravity hammer had been repaired. Elite guards followed. He saw Cass clinging to the core. "Where is the animal?" "Busy." He raised the hammer. 40 seconds. The beacon shook from inside. Pepper had found the bad smell. Vorak swung the gravity hammer. Cass released the beacon frame. The hammer struck where her torso had been. Local gravity folded inward. Living tissue collapsed around the weapon, trapping its head inside the core. Vorak pulled. The beacon pulled back. Cass landed on the narrow platform beside him. Elite guards approached from both sides. Siva activated the cargo crane again, sweeping an empty egg rack across the first group. The medical officer fired a rescue line around the second guard's legs and dragged him off balance. 30 seconds. Inside the beacon, Pepper bit through membranes carrying concentrated control scent. Fluid coated her nose and eyes. Parasite tendrils tightened around her body. Loose skin shifted under their grip, allowing her spine to turn while the outer hide remained caught. She found a hard object pulsing at the center. The master parasite was larger than the ones beneath Azhara's collars. It had no eyes, limbs, or mouth. It existed to receive pain commands and multiply them through every connected animal. Pepper bit it. The parasite discharged. Every muscle in the badger's body locked. Her jaws stayed closed. The current continued, designed to force predators away. Pepper had been bitten by venomous snakes and trampled by animals 10 times her size. She understood pain as a fact, not a vote. Her jaws tightened. The master parasite tore. The termination countdown vanished at 3 seconds. Across the crown, green collars went dark. Hatchlings stopped convulsing. Azhara's injured young opened its eyes inside her throat pouch. Adult serpents chained in remote bays raised their heads. The beacon died. Vorak saw the darkened displays and abandoned the hammer. "What did you send inside?" Cass moved between him and the access aperture. "Earth's meanest animal." The beacon armor cracked. Pepper's nose appeared through a seam. Cass pulled at the plate. It did not move. The master parasite's death had triggered internal sterilization. White heat climbed through the core. "Pepper, dig." Claws scraped from inside. Vorak seized Cass by the back of her uniform and threw her aside. "The creature dies with the infection." He reached for the emergency purge. Azhara struck the outer moon. The platform tilted. Vorak lost his footing. Cass caught the beacon frame and used the motion to kick his lower knee. The warlord fell against the purge controls. She grabbed his ceremonial mantle and wrapped it around one upper arm. He was 3 times her mass and armored. She did not try to overpower him. She tied the mantle to the hammer shaft still embedded in living tissue. Vorak surged forward. The trapped hammer pulled him backward. Cass reached the beacon seam. Pepper. A pale claw broke through. She caught it with both hands. Pepper twisted, widening the opening. Cass pulled. The plate peeled away, releasing smoke and green fluid. The badger emerged without most of her whiskers, and with fury in every line of her body. She climbed Cass, crossed her shoulders, and leaped at Vorak. This time, the warlord retreated. The entire moon shook. Azhara's breach had opened the brood vault, but Vorak's gravity strike ruptured the beacon's connection to the crown's stabilizing core. Artificial gravity fluctuated. Egg racks tore loose. Atmosphere vented through fractures. Structural collapse in 12 minutes, Siva said. The crown is breaking along the equator. Vorak cut his mantle free and ran toward the command ship. His guards abandoned the platform to protect him. Cass could chase or rescue the eggs. She looked at Pepper. The badger was already climbing onto the nearest transport case. Rescue, Cass said. They opened the quarantine locks. The royal dock contained 216 eggs, 43 hatchlings, and 19 adult serpents held in isolated bays. No available vessel could carry them all before the moon split. Azhara solved the first part. She tore the brood vault open to space and coiled her body around the exposed chambers, sealing the breach with her armor. Adult serpents inside smelled her through the fractured walls. Their calls moved through the station. Drosh released each restraint from the chain control room. Serpents entered vacuum and gathered around Azhara. They had never flown free. Some moved awkwardly, fins weak from captivity. Others remembered patterns their bodies had not used since hatching. The adults formed a living shelter around the moon. Terran and Varkan ships approached together. Rescue crews loaded egg cases. Neutral captains ignored Vorak's order to fire and converted their hangars into nurseries. Covenant delegates carried hatchlings through smoke. The elderly judge refused evacuation until the last legal aid left the dock. Cass found the injured juvenile from the arena, inside a medical carrier. Its heart had weakened again during the control pulse. A Varkan medic tried to load it onto a shuttle, but the carrier would not fit through the damaged hatch. "We leave the frame," Cass said. They opened it. The young serpent could not support its body. Pepper crawled beside its head, smelled the old collar wound, and clicked her teeth. The juvenile's tendrils touched the badger. Cass and 3 medics lifted sections of the serpent onto flexible stretchers. They moved it through the hatch one length at a time. The moon groaned around them. 6 minutes, Siva called. Egg case after egg case crossed into waiting ships. One cargo elevator jammed with 30 embryos below the dock. Pepper entered the machinery before engineers could stop her. She climbed through gears, found the melted brake line, and tore insulation from a secondary cable. Cass followed the camera feed and translated the badger's location to the repair crew. The elevator rose. Pepper emerged covered in lubricant and accepted no responsibility for the bite marks in 3 power conduits. 4 minutes. Vorak's command ship launched. It carried a single gold egg from a private vault and the genetic archive used to breed control parasites. Admiral Cho moved to intercept, but the Crown's collapse placed hundreds of rescue craft in the line of fire. "Let him go," Cass said over the fleet channel. "Save the brood." The Admiral's tactical officer objected. Vorak could rebuild an army from the archive. He could attack Sable Reach before his fractured fleet decided where it stood. "If we fire through evacuating animals to stop him," Cass replied, "we prove his lesson that powerful lives are worth more than vulnerable ones. He expects us to choose pursuit. Don't. Admiral Cho ordered rescue priority. Vorak escaped toward the gas giant. The last egg case reached a Varkan transport with 90 seconds remaining. Cass, Pepper, Drosh, Siva, and the medical team boarded the rescue cutter. The injured juvenile occupied the center deck. Its tendrils remained wrapped gently around Pepper's harness. The cutter cleared the dock. Azhara released the moon. Adult serpents carried hatchlings in throat pouches and guided them through the debris field. Ships withdrew. The crown of ash split along its equator. The beacon tower, royal dock, and restraint chambers disappeared inside a silent burst of stone and metal. Azhara coiled around the largest fragment, shielding a group of weak juveniles from the shock wave. When debris cleared, every rescued egg remained accounted for. The crown that had imprisoned generations was gone. The warlord remained. His command ship descended into the gas giant's upper atmosphere, carrying the gold egg toward a storm larger than Earth. Drosh saw the trajectory and became afraid. "That is the first brood route," he said. "What's there?" Cass asked. "Not what's who." Ancient songs described a serpent so old that Varkan civilization built its first sky cities around her migrations. The first mother had vanished 3 centuries ago, shortly before the War Serpent program began. Historians called her a myth. Drosh opened the genetic archive fragments copied from the crown. The gold egg was not an embryo. It was a biological key grown from first mother tissue. "Vorak can wake her," he said. "Can he control her?" "He believes he can." Pepper shook lubricant from her fur across the command deck. Cass looked at the gas giant. He believed that about Azhara too. The gas giant's official name was Varka's Lantern. Its upper atmosphere glowed orange around bands of violet storm. Floating cities harvested fuel near the poles. No vessel entered the equatorial cyclone because gravity distortions could tear cruisers in half. Vorak flew directly into it. Admiral Cho established a rescue perimeter instead of pursuit. The rescued brood filled every available medical bay. Azhara remained with them, circling transport ships and touching each hull with her tendrils as if counting young by scent. Cass wanted her help. She also knew asking a mother to leave newly freed offspring and chase their captor repeated the logic she had fought all day. "We go without her," she said. Drosh studied the storm. "A standard cutter will not survive." "Then find a non-standard one." A neutral Varkan captain offered a skyherder vessel older than Vorak's empire. Before serpents became weapons, herders followed migrations through the gas giant to protect floating farms. The ship had flexible gravity fins and a hull designed to bend rather than resist pressure waves. Its captain was a gray-horned woman named Serpent, whose grandmother taught her fragments of the old songs. "The warlord banned skyherder music," Serpent said as Cass boarded. "He said it made serpents difficult to condition." "Then bring every song you remember." Pepper entered the vessel voluntarily after smelling the food storage. Cass treated her burns, replaced the damaged camera harness, and offered water. The Badger slept for 14 minutes, woke, and began testing the cabin latches. "She should remain with the fleet," Drosh said. "Tell her." He looked at Pepper chewing a restraint strap. "I am practicing uncertainty, not stupidity." The skyherder descended. Clouds swallowed the stars. Lightning moved sideways through orange vapor. Serpent piloted between gravity folds using instruments that sang changing notes rather than displaying numbers. Each tone matched a pattern in the old migration songs. "Our ancestors learned roots from the serpents," she explained. "Later warlords claimed the serpents followed us." History had reversed teacher and student, just as it reversed guide and weapon. Vorak's command ship appeared ahead, descending beside a dark shape inside the storm. At first Cass mistook the shape for a mountain. The First Mother uncoiled. She was more than 6 kilometers long. Crystal growths covered her armor. Entire ecosystems lived between the plates. Floating plants, nesting creatures, and luminous swarms carried through centuries of migration. Her tendrils extended like rivers through cloud. One eye opened. The pressure of that movement shook the sky herder. Vorak's ship approached the giant head. It launched the gold biological key, which unfolded into a web around one sensory tendril. Green light spread through ancient tissue. The First Mother roared. Floating cities heard the sound across half the planet. Their foundations shifted. Fuel platforms broke moorings. The storm changed direction around her pane. Vorak transmitted to the fleet above. Behold the source of Varkan dominion. Return to formation, or I will command the First Mother to rise through your ships. Several neutral captains panicked, weapons powered, rescue craft scattered around the brood. Admiral Cho held position. The last animal you commanded destroyed your arena. Your predictions need work. Vorak activated the gold key. First Mother turned upward. If she reached orbit while thrashing under control, thousands of ships and rescued eggs would die. Azhara moved between the brood transports and the planet, ready to meet the ancient Serpent. Serpent played the migration song across every transmitter. The notes entered the storm. First Mother's eyes shifted toward the sky herder. Her movement slowed, but the gold web pulsed again and forced her upward. The key carries parasites, Cass said. Same bad smell, larger collar. Drosh examined the web. Its central control is aboard Vorak's ship. The biological key only relays. Pepper woke at the scent sample Cass opened. She went to the airlock. No, Cass said. This isn't a ventilation shaft, that's a gas planet. The Badger scratched the inner door. Still no. They could not send her through the atmosphere alone. They could, however, place the sky herder against Vorak's hull. Serpent followed a migration fold beneath First Mother's jaw. Lightning struck the flexible fins. The ship rolled through cloud, passed between tendrils wider than towers, and reached Vorak's command vessel. The Warlord fired. Skyherder armor bent around the pulse. Serpent matched hull rotation and attached a magnetic bridge to the command ship's lower maintenance ring. Cass opened the inner airlock. Pepper entered the bridge before she finished speaking. I wish one part of the plan surprised her, Cass said. She followed with Drosh and 2 herder crew members. Serpent remained aboard to continue the song. Vorak's ship had lost most of its crew during the Crown evacuation. Loyal guards protected the bridge and biological control chamber. Emergency gravity shifted whenever First Mother moved, turning corridors into walls. Pepper traveled regardless of orientation. She followed the parasites sent through cable ducts, while Cass and Drosh used the main passage. The first guards surrendered when Drosh showed them the hatchery recording. The second group fired. Cass used a flexible maintenance panel as a shield while the herder crew cut lights. Drosh entered an old handler override and locked the guards inside their own weapons bay. You know many useful codes, Cass said. I used them for the wrong work. Codes don't care, people can change. They reached the control chamber. Vorak stood inside a ring of green neural fluid. His gravity hammer connected to the biological key through the ship. Each movement of the weapon sent pain into First Mother's tendril. You abandoned the crown, Drosh said. I preserved the future. You preserved one egg and left hundreds to die. Numbers do not equal value. The gold key commands a god. Cass watched Pepper's camera enter a conduit above them. You spent your life proving you don't recognize gods, animals, or people. You recognize leverage. Vorak activated the hammer. Gravity slammed Cass, Drosh, and the herders against the floor. Pepper fell inside the conduit but caught a grill. First Mother rose toward orbit. Azhara called from above the atmosphere. The ancient serpent heard her descendant. The gold key forced her jaws open. Drosh tried to stand. Vorak increased gravity until one of his knees struck the deck. "I gave you purpose," the warlord said. "Without command, Varka becomes 1,000 frightened tribes." "Then let us be frightened," Drosh answered. "Fear belongs to the person feeling it." Pepper reached the conduit above the neural fluid ring. The parasite scent came from 3 cables entering Vorak's hammer. She bit the first. Gravity tilted sideways. Cass slid across the chamber and caught the ring frame. Vorak adjusted the hammer. Pepper bit the second cable. First Mother's jaws closed before reaching orbit. The third cable was armored. Pepper dug at its insulation while green current shocked her paws. Vorak saw the camera feed on his display. That vermin again. He reversed the conduit fans. Air pulled Pepper toward a waste blade. Cass climbed the ring and struck the fan control. Vorak swung the hammer. She ducked. The weapon hit the neural fluid tank. Green liquid flooded the chamber. The hammer's armored cable became wet. Pepper bit it. Current arced through the fluid. Vorak's armor locked. Cass and Drosh were thrown clear. The third cable split between Pepper's teeth. The gold key lost command. First Mother stopped rising. She hung beneath the cloud tops, 6 kilometers of ancient life deciding what to do next. Vorak forced his armor to move and lifted the hammer manually. She will obey the strongest signal. Serpent's migration song filled the damaged ship. Azhara answered from orbit. Thousands of newly freed serpents joined her. First Mother listened to the brood her species had lost. Then she turned toward Vorak's vessel. First Mother's tendrils closed around the command ship. The hull bent. Warning lights flashed. Vorak raised the gravity hammer as if a weapon built for soldiers could threaten a creature older than his empire. "Restore the link," he ordered Drosh. The former handler stood beside Cass in the spilled neural fluid. "No." Vorak looked more shocked by that refusal than by the ancient serpent outside. He activated a final control hidden in the hammer. The gold web around First Mother's tendril began to constrict. It carried no command now, only a self-destruct charge designed to sever the living limb and scatter parasite tissue through the storm. "He'll poison the atmosphere," Cass said. Drosh searched the broken console. The detonation code is inside the hammer. Vorak backed toward an escape pod, weapon held across his body. His armor had recovered enough movement to make him dangerous. The First Mother belongs to Varka. If she cannot serve, she returns to myth. Pepper dropped from the conduit onto his upper shoulder. The badger had burns along her paws and green fluid in her fur. She still followed the same scent. Vorak struck at her. Pepper crossed behind his horns, descended the opposite arm, and bit the hammer where the final cable entered its grip. The warlord squeezed the trigger. Nothing happened. Cass seized the hammerhead. Drosh took the shaft with 2 hands. Vorak held it with all 4. For an instant they pulled against one another while the ship creaked inside First Mother's grasp. Pepper solved the contest by biting Vorak's inner wrist. He released one hand. Cass and Drosh twisted the weapon sideways. It tore free. Cass threw it into the broken neural tank. Pepper jumped after it. "No!" The badger landed on the tank rim and attacked the hammer. Claws opened its casing. Teeth found the detonation module. She ripped it out and crushed it against the deck. The gold web went dark. First Mother opened her mouth around the command ship. Vorak entered the escape pod and sealed it. "Let him go," Cass told the serpent through every external speaker. "Not free, alive." She had no idea whether First Mother understood translation. Serret's migration song carried beneath the words. Azhara's call answered above. The ancient Serpent felt the command ship's small escape pod detach. One tendril caught it. First Mother did not crush the pod. She carried it against the command ship's hull where everyone could see the warlord trapped inside his own transparent armor. The rest of Vorak's crew surrendered. First Mother tore the gold biological key from her flesh. The wound released clouds of dark blood and parasite fluid. Skyherder vessels moved closer with medical fields, but they waited beyond the tendrils. Cass opened a channel. Serret, does the old song include help? It includes shelter offered during lightning. Play that. The herder captain changed the notes. First Mother listened. After a long moment, she extended the wounded tendril toward the nearest medical field. The ship cleaned parasite residue without touching living tissue. An ancient relationship resumed where conquest had interrupted it. The Serpent released Vorak's command vessel. Serret docked and pulled Cass, Pepper, Drosh, and the herder crew back aboard. The Badger objected to decontamination until Cass entered the wash chamber with her. "You are green," Cass said. Pepper shook chemical foam across her face. That was an observation, not criticism. They rose through the storm beside First Mother. Clouds opened. Azhara waited above with the rescued adults. The two serpents approached slowly. First Mother's tendrils spread across hundreds of kilometers. Azhara looked small beside her, though she had filled the arena hours earlier. Their calls met. No translator could hold the exchange. It traveled through radio receivers, ship hulls, and the gas giant's magnetic field. The rescued serpents answered. Hatchlings moved within transport bays. Eggs vibrated in their cases. First Mother had called into an empty migration route for 3 centuries. The route answered. Neutral Varkan ships completed their choice. They surrounded Vorak's escape pod and accepted the Covenant judge's arrest warrant. No Terran vessel boarded it. Varkan officers opened the hatch. The warlord emerged without his hammer, throne, fleet, or serpent. Pepper watched from the Skyherder window, while 4 of his former guards placed restraints on all 4 wrists. "You defeated nothing," Vorak shouted toward Cass's channel. "A beast broke a machine." Cass looked at Azhara and First Mother coiling through sunlight above the planet. "That's exactly what happened. You just misunderstood which one was the beast." The transmission spread across the galaxy before Vorak reached custody. Sable Reach received the withdrawal order 20 minutes later. Varkan occupation ships powered down. Prison transports opened. Colonists emerged from shelters to find the fleet that threatened them, requesting navigation lanes home. The Covenant judge declared humanity victorious. Admiral Cho corrected him. "Humanity did not defeat Azhara," she said. "Pepper identified an illegal control system. Azhara rejected it. Varkan crews rejected their warlord. The judgment should name every choice that ended the invasion." The judge amended the record. Pepper received medical care aboard the Terran flagship. Her paw burns required regenerative wraps. The shoulder wound needed 4 stitches. She tolerated treatment only while eating boiled eggs from Cass's hand. "She saved a sector," a medic said. "She followed a smell," Cass replied. "Does that make it less heroic?" "It makes it hers." When the bandages were finished, Pepper fell asleep inside the blue travel crate with the door open. Cass sat beside it and finally allowed exhaustion to find her. She slept for 11 hours. When Cass woke, the galaxy had turned Pepper into a legend. News screens showed the Badger climbing Azhara, dragging parasite cables, riding the crane, standing on Vorak's chest, and emerging green from the dead beacon. Commentators slowed every movement and invented strategy where instinct, training, and opportunity had overlapped. One military network presented a diagram titled Terran Micropredator Doctrine. Cass turned it off. Pepper was awake inside the open crate, chewing the corner of a medical blanket. "You have a doctrine now." The badger pulled harder. "It appears to involve theft." Ambassador Okoro entered the recovery bay carrying a stack of messages. 12 governments wanted formal briefings. 4 weapons companies offered contracts for honey badger breeding programs. A luxury food brand proposed a pepper egg snack. Earth's parliament wanted Cass to appear before a public session. "No," she said. "To which request?" "Start at the top and continue until the paper stops." Okoro sat beside the crate. "The public needs an explanation." "Then explain that Pepper is not a weapon system. She is one honey badger with rescue training and questionable respect for property." "That may disappoint people." "That's good. Disappointment is safer than an army of badly handled honey badgers." He set the requests aside. Sable Reach held a remembrance instead of a victory parade. The colony read the names of those killed during the occupation and those still missing. Varkan captains who had stood down attended without uniforms. Human Marines guarded them from angry colonists, an arrangement no one enjoyed and everyone understood. Cass brought Pepper on a lead because the colony's habitat gardens contained small animals, and because Pepper's definition of diplomacy did not include staying aboard ship. Children gathered at a respectful distance. One asked whether the badger could beat Azhara in a fight. "No," Cass said. The child's face fell. "But everyone says she won." Pepper won the part she chose. She found the collars. Azhara won the part that belonged to her. Who was strongest? Cass pointed toward the memorial wall. Strength did different jobs that day. Anyone giving you one answer is trying to sell something. Pepper dug beneath a decorative plant and exposed an irrigation line. Cass moved her before she created a diplomatic incident. The Covenant Court convened Vorak's trial on a neutral station. He faced charges for the invasion, violation of the beast trial, biological coercion, attempted brood termination, destruction of his own cruiser, and threats against civilian worlds. His defense rested on one argument. The trial of beasts had been invalid because humanity's chosen animal never fought Azhara directly. The court summoned Cass. She entered with Pepper in the same blue crate. This time no one laughed. Vorak sat behind a security field. Without ceremonial armor, he seemed smaller but no less certain. "The law requires defeat," his advocate said. "The human animal did not kill, incapacitate, or force physical submission from the war serpent." The elderly Covenant judge played arena footage. Azhara lowered her head while Pepper removed the collar. The serpent then attacked the control system and refused Vorak's commands. "What condition defines submission?" the judge asked. The advocate cited 3,000 years of precedent: withdrawal, inability to continue, or recognition of the opposing beast's dominance. Azhara withdrew from the contest, the judge said. She refused to continue. She recognized the smaller animal as non-hostile and cooperated in destroying the warlord's apparatus. All 3 conditions occurred. Cooperation is not dominance. Then your law needs another word. The result remains. Vorak rose. The animal was trained to sabotage equipment. That makes it a human tool. Cass opened the crate. Pepper walked into the courtroom, smelled the floor, and headed toward the evidence table. The broken gravity hammer module rested inside a transparent case. She scratched at it. "Return," Cass said. Pepper ignored her. Cass tried the recall whistle. The badger looked back, then resumed scratching. "She understands the cue," Cass told the court. "She also decides whether obeying is worth stopping what she is doing. Training creates communication and habits. It doesn't erase choice." Vorak pointed at the badger. "It obeyed in the arena." "Sometimes. She went right when I said left. She entered the juvenile pit without permission, boarded your moon inside an egg case, and climbed into the beacon after I told her to wait. She completed the work because the control parasites smelled and behaved like things her species attacks. Then victory was instinct. Your serpent protected her young by instinct. You built an empire around exploiting it. Why does instinct disqualify her choice but validate yours? The courtroom went quiet. Pepper found the evidence case latch. Cass crossed the room before she opened it. This is why the sticker says "not without me." The court upheld the trial result. Vorak's refusal to honor it transformed his remaining military claims into piracy under the same covenant he invoked. His former worlds could choose new governments without treaty obligations to his throne. The sentence required more negotiation. Some Varkan delegates demanded execution. Families of conquered worlds wanted him to experience the control parasites. Cass opposed both. He used pain to prove that power creates permission, she said. If the court repeats that lesson on his body, it may punish him and still preserve the idea. Vorak received permanent confinement, public access to trial records, and compulsory participation in reconstruction accounting. He would spend the rest of his life listening as victims calculated what his glory cost. He called the sentence weak. The judge replied, "You have confused cruelty with seriousness for too long." Outside the court, Pepper found a ventilation cover and delayed departure by 40 minutes. The harder work unfolded around Varka's lantern. Hundreds of serpents had been hatched in captivity. Many lacked the muscle strength to follow First Mother's migration. Some panicked without collars because pain had been the only predictable part of their environment. Hatchlings refused natural food. Adults attacked medical ships whenever equipment resembled restraint gear. Sky herders returned from retirement. Old families brought flexible vessels and songs banned under Vorak. Terran veterinarians provided non-invasive imaging. Varkan handlers who renounced coercion worked under strict observation, including Drosh. No one knew whether the serpents would accept help. Azhara provided the bridge. She remained near the rescue flotilla with her 7 young. She approached medical fields after watching First Mother accept them. Other adults followed her example. When a treatment caused pain, she left, and teams changed the method before asking again. The injured juvenile from the arena struggled most. Nerve damage weakened its jaw and rear fins. It could not catch the floating organisms other young serpents ate. Hand feeding reminded it of the hatchery and triggered panic. Its weight declined. Cass joined the medical team after Pepper's paw bandages came off. The badger smelled the juvenile and crawled into its recovery habitat before anyone approved. The young serpent recoiled, then recognized her from the arena. Its tendrils touched Pepper's loose skin. Pepper ignored the feeding tools. She dug into the habitat's soil tray, found a burrowing food animal, and ate it. The juvenile watched. Cass placed another burrower beneath shallow substrate. Pepper dug again. This time the serpent's tendrils followed the movement. It snapped too slowly and missed. Pepper took the prey. Sharing is not her strength, Cass said. On the third attempt, the juvenile trapped the burrower against the habitat wall. It ate without a handler approaching. Over the following days, Pepper became an unwilling hunting tutor. She demonstrated persistence, not technique. The juvenile learned to use tendrils where the badger used claws. When it failed, Pepper stole the food. Motivation improved quickly. The young serpent gained weight. Drosh watched through the observation field. We trained obedience before feeding. We believed hunger increased attention. Hunger increases hunger, Cass said. Safety creates room to learn. He documented every change without claiming credit. First Mother began her migration 2 months after the crown fell. She rose from the gas giant with ecosystems shining across her armor. Azhara joined beside her. Freed adults formed a long spiral through the magnetic field. Medical ships carried juveniles too weak to fly, including the one Pepper had taught to hunt. The route passed near 3 Varkan worlds. Citizens gathered beneath open skies. Older people remembered being taught that war serpents existed to burn enemy cities. Children watched them carry seeds, insects, and small creatures between moons, renewing habitats along the way. The war beasts became sky guides again. Pepper watched from Cass's lap beside a ship window. When Azhara passed close, one tendril touched the hull near them. The badger stood on her hind legs and scratched the glass. "You cannot ride her," Cass said. Pepper continued scratching. "I appreciate your consistency." Removing Vorak did not make his empire peaceful. 31 worlds had organized transport, food, and law around obedience to a single throne. Provincial commanders controlled local fleets. Some released political prisoners and formed councils. Others declared themselves warlords. Trade routes stalled because captains feared choosing the wrong authority. Varka's capital faced food shortages within a month. The Provisional Assembly asked humanity to administer the former empire until elections. Earth refused. Human cargo ships delivered grain. Engineers restored civilian gates. Mediators helped rivals occupy the same rooms without shooting. Terran forces protected relief corridors but accepted no Varkan territory. "Why reject rule when you want it?" General Mav Kor asked Admiral Cho during a public session. Kor had commanded Vorak's capital defense and changed sides only after the crown fell. His armor remained polished with imperial symbols. "Because helping you stand does not entitle us to choose where you walk," Cho replied. Kor called the answer false modesty. Cass distrusted him for a simpler reason. Pepper hated his boots. The badger encountered the general at a relief conference on Varka Prime. She smelled his lower armor, raised her fur, and tried to bite the ankle seal. Cass pulled her back before diplomatic security intervened. "Apologies," Cass said. Kor stared at Pepper. "The famous beast lacks discipline. She usually has a reason." "What have you stepped in?" "Nothing." He left before she could scan the armor. The following night, a young sky guide attacked a grain transport outside the capital. The Serpent had joined the migration but fallen behind due to weak fins. Relief crews fed it near a floating farm. Without warning, it struck the transport, damaged 2 engines, and chased evacuation pods toward the city. News channels revived old images of war serpent attacks. Loyalist politicians demanded control collars. General Kor offered military protection and warned that humanity's liberation experiment had released dangerous animals over civilian worlds. Cass examined the damaged transport. Pepper found green fluid on the landing gear. The same parasite compound used at the hull. "Someone marked the ship," Cass said. Drosh scanned the residue. A lure variant. It creates the scent of a threat near juveniles. "How did it get onto a relief transport?" Security logs showed the vessel had passed through a capital inspection yard, controlled by General Kor. The evidence was suggestive, not enough for arrest. Kor invited investigators into the yard, confident they would find nothing. Cass brought Pepper. The general objected. "That animal attacked me." "She inspected your boot." "With its teeth." "Her preferred instrument." The yard appeared clean. Workers had replaced every floor panel and burned waste records. Pepper ignored the storage sheds and followed the scent beneath a ceremonial monument to Vorak's first conquest. Kor blocked her. "The memorial is protected." Pepper dug at the foundation. Cass unclipped the lead. "So is evidence." The badger disappeared beneath the monument. Stone trembled. A hidden access panel opened from below. Pepper emerged carrying a sealed parasite capsule. Security officers drew weapons. Not on Core. On Cass. The general had placed loyalists throughout the investigation team. Human operatives brought contraband into a sacred site, he announced to waiting media. We have caught the sabotage in progress. Broadcast drones moved closer. The accusation had been prepared before the search began. Cass raised her hands. Pepper kept the capsule in her mouth. If I brought it, Cass said, why did you stop her before she dug? Because I respect our dead. You respect useful graves. Core ordered an officer to seize Pepper. The officer approached with a capture loop. The Badger backed into the tunnel beneath the monument. Cass whistled recall. Pepper looked at her and vanished underground. You see, Core said to the cameras, the human cannot control its own beast. That's never been the point. Security detained Cass and Drosh. Core's people entered the tunnel after Pepper. None returned. Some shouted. One fired a pulse weapon that cracked the monument's base. The damaged foundation exposed a larger chamber. Hundreds of parasite capsules lined the walls. Control beacons, lure emitters, and stolen crown records occupied sealed racks. General Core had preserved enough equipment to rebuild Vorak's system. Pepper sat on the central crate, licking green residue from one paw. Every media drone recorded the cache. Core's narrative failed in real time. He grabbed Cass and placed a sidearm against her head. In the broadcast. Varkan security hesitated. Some belonged to him. Others had just watched his evidence room open beneath an imperial monument. Drosh stepped forward. You marked the grain ship. The people needed to remember why command exists. You endangered them to prove they require protection. Fear unifies. Vorak understood that. Cass watched Pepper descend from the crate. The Badger entered the crowd beneath hanging equipment, following Core's familiar boot scent. Fear also informs, Cass said. Core tightened his hold. About what? Where to bite? Pepper hit his ankle. The general fired into the ceiling. Cass twisted free. Drosh caught the weapon hand. Varkan officers who had served Core watched their commander fall beneath the same animal he accused humanity of controlling. One officer lowered his rifle. Then another. They arrested him. The cache records exposed a loyalist network across 9 worlds. Instead of hiding the extent to prevent panic, the Provisional Assembly published every name and location. Citizens searched old monuments, military depots, and estate vaults. More control equipment came to light. Core's attempted coup ended without a battle because his own officers chose evidence over loyalty. The young serpent that attacked the grain ship recovered in a skyherder habitat. When the lure compound cleared from its senses, it returned to the migration. The transport crew requested that the public record describe the animal as poisoned, not hostile. Varka's first elections occurred 6 months later. No single ruler replaced Vorak. Worlds formed a federation with authority divided among elected councils, independent courts, and local assemblies. The arrangement looked inefficient to people accustomed to commands. It also made it much harder for one frightened general to aim an empire. Drosh ran for no office. He established a training center for former handlers who wanted to work with skyherders under consent protocols. The center's first lesson used footage of him activating Azhara's collars. Why begin with your worst act? A trainee asked. Because skill without memory becomes pride, he said. Cass visited during the first class. Pepper entered the equipment room and found that Drosh had replaced restraint poles with open medical platforms and scent-based choice markers. The Badger smelled his boots. This time she did not bite them. Drosh seemed more relieved than he had at Vorak's conviction. Do not consider that forgiveness, Cass said. I consider it continued possession of my foot. An appropriate beginning. The Covenant Assembly met the following year to decide whether trials of beasts should exist at all. Traditional rulers defended the ritual as a substitute for war. They argued that 2 animals in an arena cost fewer lives than 2 fleets in space. Survivors from Sable Reach answered that Vorak had used the trial to decorate an invasion already underway. Animal welfare delegates asked why peace between governments should depend on creatures incapable of accepting the stakes. Cass testified with Pepper asleep beneath her chair. "The trial did not prevent violence," she said. "It concentrated violence on animals rulers believed they owned. The galaxy calls that mercy because the audience stands far from the sand." One monarch asked whether humanity would reject the outcome if Pepper had lost. Pepper could not agree to gamble Earth's freedom. Azhara could not agree to gamble Sable Reach. The only legitimate part of that day began when both animals stopped performing the roles we assigned them. The Assembly abolished compulsory beast trials. Governments could still settle disputes through voluntary competitions, but no animal could represent territorial surrender, and no controlled organism counted as a sovereign party. The amendment became known informally as Pepper's Clause. Cass disliked the name. She didn't write legislation, she told reporters. Ambassador Okoro smiled. Neither did most people with legislation named after them. Earth's animal behavior agencies faced their own questions. Pepper belonged to a conservation program, not Cass personally. Officials proposed retiring her into a secure research habitat where scientists could study the traits that made her effective. "You want to reward her by putting her behind glass," Cass said. The program director described the habitat as enriched, spacious, and safe. "Safe for whom?" Pepper answered by opening the meeting room cabinet and emptying nutrition bars across the floor. The agency allowed her to remain with Cass under field care supervision. They returned to work. Not war work. Pepper inspected cargo for wildlife smugglers, located animals trapped after earthquakes, and taught new handlers humility by ignoring them. Her galactic fame attracted crowds, so Cass scheduled rescues at quiet sites and refused arena appearances. Pepper did one public event each year at Sable Reach. The colony had rebuilt its defense platforms as rescue stations. Former prison bays became clinics. Varkan, human, and Kelari children attended classes together. A mural showed Pepper beside Azhara, but Cass made the artist remove a scene where the badger stood triumphantly over the serpent. "They were on the same side," she said. During the second annual gathering, Azhara's migration passed the Reach. The sky guides did not approach inhabited stations without invitation. Colony transmitters played Serret's shelter song. First, Mother changed course, followed by hundreds of adults and growing juveniles. The injured Serpent Pepper had taught to hunt traveled near Azhara. Its rear fins remained smaller than average, but it moved without medical support. Pepper watched through the rescue station window. The young serpent separated from the migration and touched its tendrils to the outer hull. Sensors recorded a scent exchange pattern. Cass opened the observation shutters but not the airlock. "No riding," she reminded Pepper. The badger scratched the glass. The reunion became important an hour later when Sable Reach's star erupted. Observatories detected the flare too late. A magnetic shock front crossed the system, disabling navigation buoys and overloading station shields. The colony's outer agricultural ring lost power. 12,000 residents entered emergency shelters. 3 transport ships carrying school groups drifted beyond safe docking lanes. The sky guides felt the storm before instruments completed their warning. Their crystal armor collected magnetic charge. First Mother altered the migration, spreading adults into a broad spiral around the colony. Human controllers feared a collision. Serpent recognized the formation. "They are making a calm path." The Serpent's fins redirected charged particles around Sable Reach, shaping a corridor through the flare. Azhara held the inner edge. The injured young Serpent placed itself beside the drifting school transports. Its tendrils attached gently to one hull and guided it toward the rescue station. The second transport followed. The third had lost maneuvering power and begun tumbling. A docking strut tore loose inside, trapping students behind a damaged bulkhead. Cass boarded a rescue shuttle with Pepper and a mechanical team. The flare blinded remote drones. Manual piloting brought them through the corridor formed by Azhara and First Mother. The shuttle attached to the tumbling transport. Inside, gravity changed direction every few seconds. Cass moved along handholds. Pepper traveled across walls and ceilings without caring which surface counted as floor. They reached the blocked classroom. Metal had folded across the emergency release. The gap was too small for Cass. Pepper entered. Students screamed when the famous badger emerged through smoke. Their teacher kept them still. Cass guided Pepper by voice from the other side, directing her toward the manual lock cable. The badger found 3 cables and bit the wrong one first. Lights went out. "Red sleeve," Cass said through the gap. "Find the cloth." The teacher wrapped a red emergency band around the correct line. Pepper smelled it, dug through insulation and pulled. The bulkhead released. Cass and the mechanical team forced it open. Students crossed into the rescue corridor. One small Varkan child refused to leave without a classroom terrarium containing 6 floating insects. Pepper picked up the container handle and dragged it after him. "She understands," the child said. "She wants what's inside," Cass replied. "Keep moving." They reached the shuttle as the transport's reactor failed. The injured sky guide wrapped around the tumbling hull. Its fins absorbed the first explosion and directed debris away from the rescue craft. Azhara joined, shielding her grown young from the magnetic storm. Cass saw the same pattern as the arena, a giant serpent protecting something smaller while Pepper attacked the mechanism trapping it. No one had commanded either animal. The shuttle returned to Sable Reach with every student alive. First Mother's spiral held until the flare passed. Sky guides released stored energy into the gas clouds beyond the colony, creating an aurora visible from every habitat. Residents left shelters beneath rivers of orange and violet light. The rescued children gathered at the observation window. Pepper sat among them chewing the terrarium handle until Cass traded it for an egg. Outside, Azhara and her grown young touched tendrils to the glass. The colony sent no speech of gratitude. Serpent played the shelter song. Azhara answered. The migration continued. Varkan historians revised the oldest sky guide records. The Serpents had protected floating cities from storms for thousands of years before rulers fitted them with armor and called protection conquest. What Vorak presented as military dominance was a corrupted memory of partnership. Sable Reach installed no control beacons. It built open migration markers the Serpents could ignore. They returned by choice the next season. Pepper's clause influenced more than ritual law. Courts cited it when governments tried to claim native species as strategic resources. Military academies taught the Crown rescue as an example of restraint under pressure. Animal handlers across the sector replaced dominance fields with voluntary training systems. Change was inconsistent. Some worlds kept old cages and changed only the labels. Companies advertised consent-certified breeding programs while controlling food access. Cass spent as much time exposing false reform as celebrating real progress. Pepper helped by biting through a surprising number of dishonest inspection seals. She has a gift for regulatory work, Ambassador Okoro said. She has a gift for sealed containers. Regulation is a side effect. The blue travel crate remained part of every mission. Cass replaced the latch twice and patched 4 air holes. Pepper could escape it whenever she worked long enough, but she often slept there with the door open. Choice had changed the meaning of the same plastic walls. 5 years after the Hall of Conquest, Cass brought Pepper back to the land where her species began. The Kalahari Reserve stretched beneath a red evening sky. Solar collectors stood beyond dunes and thorn scrub. Conservation drones tracked animals without broadcasting into their territory. Cass had accepted a position training off-world rescue teams, but Pepper was no longer a working animal. Age appeared first in small negotiations. The badger slept longer after missions. Cold mornings stiffened one rear leg. She still opened latches, stole food, and threatened anyone who approached a medical kit too quickly, but her body required time her mind did not respect. The veterinarian recommended retirement. Cass agreed aloud and resisted privately. For years, danger had provided the shape of their partnership. Cass identified the problem, Pepper ignored half the plan, and together they found a way through. Retirement asked Cass to express care by refusing adventures Pepper still wanted. She rebuilt the old blue crate as a shaded sleeping den beside her field cabin. The door never closed. Pepper used it when convenient and dug a second exit through the floor. Symbolism was apparently too subtle, Cass said. Pepper emerged beneath the water tank. Sky guides entered the solar system during the reserve's dry season. First Mother's migration now crossed interstellar fold currents between Varka's lantern and a nursery nebula beyond human space. Azhara had traveled the route twice. Earth invited the Serpents to use the magnetosphere, but placed no beacon that required a response. Most passed beyond the moon. One juvenile did not. Sensors detected a small sky guide falling through the atmosphere over southern Africa. Its fins failed during entry. The animal struck the desert 80 kilometers from Cass's cabin, carving a trench through sand and stone. Cass received the alert because of her serpent handling experience. Pepper heard the emergency tone and entered the transport before Cass finished reading. "You're staying." The badger moved behind the driver's seat. "Pepper." She lay down and looked away. Cass called a younger handler, 19-year-old Arya Mensa, and assigned Pepper to the reserve clinic. Arya arrived with a veterinary team and a cautious expression. "She saved a sector," the trainee said. "Today she needs to save energy. Don't confuse history with current medical clearance." Pepper watched Cass leave without her. The crashed juvenile was 30 meters long, small by Skyguide standards. Its armor had been cut by an artificial filament. A metal harpoon remained beneath one fin. Green parasite residue coated the wound. Someone had attacked it inside human space. Cass established a perimeter. The juvenile snapped at drones and buried its head beneath sand whenever medical equipment approached. Its distress calls would reach Azhara eventually, but solar interference delayed transmissions. Arya studied the harpoon. Varkan manufacture. Copied Varkan design. The serial marks are fake. Tracks led from the crashed trench toward a dry riverbed. A ground vehicle had approached before the rescue team and left quickly. Whoever fired the harpoon expected to collect the animal after it fell. Cass reported an active poaching threat. Earth security searched roads and airspace. Nothing appeared. The smugglers understood reserve surveillance. The juvenile's condition worsened. The parasite residue stimulated panic but did not include a full control colony. Removing the harpoon required the animal to remain still. Skyherder songs calmed it briefly, then stopped working whenever a particular wind crossed the riverbed. Cass smelled nothing. The juvenile did. "There is another lure upwind," she said. Drones found no transmitter. At the reserve clinic, Pepper began scratching the western wall. Arya tried food, enrichment toys, and a walk in the enclosure. The badger returned to the same wall. Beneath it ran an old drainage pipe leading toward the dry riverbed. Arya called Cass. "I think she smells something." Cass looked at the juvenile, reacting to the western wind. "Close every external access. Do not let her into that pipe." "Understood." Pepper had already opened the maintenance latch. Arya entered the pipe after her. The drainage route joined a network of abandoned mining tunnels beneath the reserve. Cameras lost signal after 200 meters. Pepper moved toward a parasite scent human instruments could not distinguish from mineral deposits. Arya kept Cass informed by audio. "She is slowing on the slopes. Bring her back." "She refuses." "You're the handler. You said training doesn't erase choice." Cass regretted teaching well at inconvenient moments. "Choice doesn't erase your responsibility either. Stay behind her. If she shows pain, carry her out." Cass divided the rescue team. Half remained with the Serpent. She led the rest toward the tunnel's mapped exit. Earth security moved from the opposite side. Pepper reached a buried chamber. Inside, smugglers had installed a skyguide lure, tissue freezer, and fold transmitter. Harpoon cables filled the walls. The ground vehicle from the crashed trench sat beneath camouflage netting. 4 armed poachers prepared to fire a second control charge remotely. Pepper entered through a ventilation gap. She smelled the green lure and attacked its cable. The poachers saw her. One recognized the gray back and scarred shoulder. "That's the Earth animal," he said. Fame saved Pepper for 3 seconds. They wanted her alive. One deployed a capture net instead of firing. Pepper turned inside it, but age slowed the movement that once let her escape instantly. Arya entered the chamber and struck the net control with a rescue pole. The poachers fired at her. She rolled behind the vehicle. Pepper tore one paw free and bit through the lure line. At the crashed trench, the juvenile stopped panicking. Cass heard gunfire through Arya's channel. She abandoned the surface entrance and entered the mining tunnel directly. Security converge on the chamber. Arya status. Pinned. Pepper is tangled. Do not move toward her until the firing stops. They are taking her. The smugglers lifted the net into their vehicle. The badger fought, exhausting herself against reinforced fiber. One poacher opened the fold transmitter. Arya threw her rescue pole beneath the vehicle's rear axle and activated its expansion field. The pole lengthened, lifting one wheel from the floor. The vehicle turned in place and struck the chamber wall. Pepper's net fell. She stopped fighting for a moment. When a poacher opened it to check her, she bit his glove and escaped beneath the vehicle. Cass reached the chamber as Earth security entered from the west. The smugglers surrendered between 2 teams. Arya crawled under the vehicle and found Pepper lying beside the severed lure cable. The badger tried to stand. Her rear leg folded. Cass lifted her carefully. "You were retired." Pepper licked green residue from her nose. "That was not permission to ignore me." Arya looked guilty. "I let her enter the pipe." "She would have entered with or without you. Following kept her alive." "Next time, close the second latch too." "There won't be a next time." Cass looked at Pepper. "There is always a next time, we just plan better." Security recovered a list of buyers seeking skyguide tissue and control parasite samples. The network included remnants of Vorak's weapons industry and collectors who wanted trophies from the famous species. Coordinated arrests began across 12 systems. At the surface, the young Serpent allowed Cass's team to approach once the lure stopped. They removed the harpoon and treated the fin. Arya placed Pepper's travel crate near the animal, open and shaded. The badger slept through most of the procedure. The juvenile's tendrils touched the crate gently. Azhara arrived above Earth the following morning. Clouds divided around her armored body. Human defense systems remained powered down. She descended over the reserve with the same injured young she had once carried in her throat pouch, now flying beside her as an adult. Billions watched a former war serpent approach humanity's homeworld. No one fired. Azhara found the wounded juvenile beneath a magnetic shelter. Her call shook dust from the field tents. The young animal answered. She examined the repaired fin, smelled the parasite harpoon, and turned one amber eye toward Cass. Pepper emerged from the blue crate, limping. Azhara lowered her head. The badger walked forward until one enormous tendril rested in the sand before her. She smelled it, scratched once at a piece of dried green residue, and sat down. The war serpent remained still. Earth's meanest animal, and the creature she was supposed to fight met again without an arena between them. Azhara remained at the reserve for 3 days. She did not cross into cities or allow aircraft close to her young. Human scientists established observation zones beyond the dunes. Sky herders played shelter songs from orbit. Cass refused every request to stage a reunion for cameras. The serpent chose her own moments. At dawn, she guided the injured juvenile through shallow atmospheric currents, teaching it to unfold healing fins without bearing full magnetic load. The adult with the smaller rear fins demonstrated a slower turn. First Mother waited beyond the moon. Her migration paused for one wounded descendant. Pepper watched from shade beside the field cabin. Her rear leg had a strained tendon, not a fracture. The veterinarian prescribed 6 weeks of limited movement. Cass installed 3 additional latches on the clinic enclosure and found Pepper beyond all of them the next morning, asleep beneath Azhara's shelter field. The giant serpent had curled her tendril around the badger without touching her. Cass sat nearby. "You are both terrible patients." Azhara's eye opened. Pepper did not bother. The reunion offered researchers a rare chance to study mutual recognition across years. Cass permitted passive scans but no samples. Data showed Azhara's heart rate lowered when Pepper's scent entered the field. Pepper's did the same when the serpent's call traveled through the ground. Neither response proved friendship in a human sense. It proved memory, which was enough. On the 3rd morning, the juvenile completed a full atmospheric turn. Azhara rose with it. Before leaving, she returned to the cabin carrying a piece of metal in her tendrils. It was a fragment of the collar Pepper had torn from her neck in the arena. The serpent placed it beside the blue travel crate. Pepper smelled the metal. She dug a hole beneath the crate, pushed the fragment inside, and covered it with red sand. Cass did not know whether one animal offered a memory and the other disposed of an unpleasant smell. The act could be both. Meaning did not need to become simple before it became important. Azhara joined the migration. First Mother and hundreds of sky guides moved past Earth, bending the aurora into long ribbons. People across the night side watched without shelters, weapons, or thrones. The rescued juvenile held its place beside Azhara. Pepper slept through their departure. The poacher arrests produced another sector-wide trial. Unlike Vorak, the smugglers claimed no empire or sacred tradition. They described skyguide tissue as merchandise and Pepper as a valuable genetic sample. Records showed they planned to sell cloned control parasites to private armies. The court used Pepper's clause to reject every ownership claim. The injured juvenile's tissue remained protected even where old law classified fallen biological material as salvage. The smugglers received prison terms, restitution orders, and permanent exclusion from wildlife territories. More important, the investigation exposed markets that treated newly recognized intelligent species as collectibles. Governments created a joint enforcement network led by conservation agencies rather than militaries. Arya joined its first field team. Cass recommended her. "I disobeyed the clinic order," Arya said. You followed Pepper into danger without backup. That was wrong. You also kept communication open, protected her when the plan failed, and told the truth afterward. Training needs people who can examine all 4 facts. Well, you laid the unit. Cass looked at Pepper sleeping in the open crate. No. For the first time, the refusal did not feel like abandonment. Cass had spent years measuring her usefulness by how quickly she entered danger. Pepper's aging forced another lesson. Care could mean allowing someone else to take the next mission while remaining present for what followed. She stayed at the reserve as a teacher and response advisor. Arya led field deployments. When problems became truly strange, she called Cass, who usually asked what the animals were doing before asking what officials wanted. Pepper retired badly but comfortably. She inspected every incoming cargo container, escaped into the kitchen garden, and opened guest luggage whenever the scent interested her. Children visited behind secure barriers and learned that respect meant not touching the famous animal. Pepper showed no appreciation for fame but tolerated stories when eggs accompanied them. The blue crate became more patched than original. Cass refused offers to replace it. Its scratches recorded journeys no metal could summarize. The door remained open. Vorak lived long enough to watch Varka's Federation survive without him. His prison allowed public news. Elections occurred. Provincial conflicts went to courts. Supply councils solved problems his fleets once treated as disobedience. The empire did not become peaceful overnight, but its people experienced fear without surrendering it to one ruler. Each year the Covenant Court delivered a reconstruction account to his cell. It listed restored colonies, removed control devices, compensated families, and habitats reopened along the Skyguide route. Vorak refused to read the first 3. On the 4th year, a guard found him studying the section about Azhara's offspring. He asked whether Pepper still lived. The guard said yes. Vorak never asked again. Sable Reach established an interspecies rescue academy. Its crest did not show Pepper defeating Azhara. It showed a small claw breaking a collar while a serpent fin curved protectively above it. Graduates studied behavior, engineering, law, and the danger of mistaking compliance for cooperation. Cass gave the first class one assignment. Find a situation where your plan depends on an animal doing exactly what you expect, she said. Then design a safe answer for when it chooses something else. Students complained that the task made every plan harder. Correct. Drosh taught remotely from Varka's Skyherder Center. His lectures addressed how skilled handlers became participants in abuse by narrowing attention to technique. He never called himself redeemed. He described repair as work without a finish line. The injured arena juvenile grew into a migration leader. Its rear fins remained uneven, so it discovered routes through weaker magnetic currents. Younger serpents and medical transports followed those paths. A disability that made it unsuitable for Vorak's battles made it exceptionally sensitive to safer roads. Skyherders named the route the Gentle Turn. First Mother used it during her final recorded migration through Varka's lantern. She entered the equatorial storm surrounded by Azhara, the arena brood, and generations born outside collars. Her immense call traveled through every floating city. No ruler claimed it. First Mother's departure revealed one last archive. As she descended into the equatorial storm, the ecosystems between her armor plates released seed clouds into the atmosphere. Skyherders tracked the clouds to a chain of floating islands hidden beneath permanent lightning. Ancient structures stood there, grown from mineral foam and serpent shed rather than built by Varkan tools. The islands had served as migration shelters. Carvings showed early Varkans offering repairs to injured fins, while serpents guided their fragile cities away from storms. No collars appeared. No thrones stood in the images. The partnership had been practical, unequal in size but not in worth. Vorak's historians had removed every reference to the islands from public records. The Varkan Federation invited Cass, Serpent, Drosh, and Covenant researchers to document the site. Cass brought no working animal. Pepper remained on Earth, old enough to prefer familiar ground. Her absence made the expedition feel wrong at first. Then Cass recognized the feeling as another form of dependence. Pepper had opened a door. She did not need to walk through every room afterward. On the largest island, they found a chamber filled with discarded serpent collars. The oldest were crude bands cut away by Varkan hands. Later devices became more sophisticated, their removal marks less common. The sequence documented a society shifting from aid to control, one small justification at a time. Drosh stood among the collars for a long while. Handlers were taught that obedience preserved the bond, he said. The first handlers removed restraints. We inherited the title and reversed the work. He placed his old command key beside the final collar. The researchers did not turn the shelter into a museum. It remained part of an active migration route. They recorded from outside, repaired storm damage, and withdrew before the next serpents arrived. Varkan schools received complete copies. Children debated the images their ancestors left instead of memorizing Vorak's approved interpretation. Some saw shame. Others saw evidence that their culture contained traditions older and better than conquest. The distinction helped reconstruction. Reform no longer sounded like surrender to humans. It could be described as returning to work Varkans had once understood. Skyherders became respected again, though they refused military rank. Their vessels followed First Mother's descendants and offered shelter songs during storms. Serpents ignored them often. The herders treated refusal as successful communication. Sable Reach joined Varka's federation as an independent partner rather than a conquered province. The colony hosted annual negotiations in the former occupation headquarters. Its central chamber kept one wall damaged, not as a monument to hatred, but as evidence of what agreements had replaced. Admiral Cho attended the first treaty signing. A Varkan journalist asked why Earth had not demanded permanent bases after spending ships and lives defending the Reach. A base may be useful, Cho said. Usefulness is not ownership. We are still learning that lesson too. Humanity's refusal became harder to dismiss as false modesty once years passed without annexation. Terran companies sought contracts, sometimes too aggressively, and Varkan courts rejected several. Earth accepted the decisions. Partnerships survived disagreement. Cass followed the changes from the reserve classroom. Pepper sometimes slept beneath the display while Varkan students attended through projection. One class asked whether honey badgers could be introduced to their worlds for control parasite detection. No, Cass said immediately. The students were surprised, but their senses are effective. So are their claws, dietary needs, territorial behavior, and ability to damage ecosystems that never evolved around them. You do not solve one history of treating animals as tools by shipping another species across the galaxy. Instead, research teams built sensors based on chemical patterns Pepper helped identify. The devices did not imitate her mind or claim ownership of her genetics. Revenue funded honey badger habitat protection on Earth and serpent rehabilitation around Varka's lantern. The first detector discovered a hidden parasite colony aboard a decommissioned warship. The crew destroyed it before anyone was harmed. They painted a small gray stripe on the detector casing, not an image of Pepper, because Cass refused to let a living animal become a military logo. Arya returned from that mission with the retired ship's final control key. Evidence archive or recycling, she asked. Cass offered the object to Pepper. The badger smelled it, turned away, and entered her crate. Recycling, Cass said. The metal became part of a public shelter roof at Sable Reach. The clearest proof that the lesson traveled beyond famous animals came from a mining moon called Harrow 9. A cargo explosion opened the enclosure of a native stoneback, a broad six-legged grazer that could break pressure doors when frightened. Early reports called it an attack. Security teams prepared lethal rifles. The nearest trained responder was a young Varkan officer whose parents had served Vorak's fleet. He reviewed the new field protocol before entering. What hurts, what blocks retreat, what choice remains? The stoneback had glass fragments beneath 1 foot. Emergency shutters trapped it between engine noise and armed people. The officer did not challenge the animal or demand submission. He lowered the noise, opened 2 roots, and placed medical foam where the stoneback could smell it. The animal chose neither exit. It approached the foam, allowed treatment from behind a barrier, and left only after the debris was removed. No heroic footage resulted, no predator fought, no empire fell. A frightened animal walked home and 12 workers survived. The officer's report mentioned Pepper only once, in the training citation. Cass considered that success. When students asked how one badger could change procedures across the sector, she corrected the question. Pepper created an opportunity, she said. Azhara refused a command. Drosh admitted his role. Varkan captains powered down. Judges changed law. Handlers practiced different skills. Thousands of choices made the change real. Never turn history into one hero if doing that lets everyone else avoid responsibility. Pepper usually slept through these lectures. On the 10th anniversary of the Covenant trial, the Hall of Conquest reopened. The ribbed throne was gone. The arena walls remained, including the broken central grate. The building became a forum for disputes, rescue planning, and public records. Its first exhibit showed unedited footage from every camera rather than a heroic montage. Cass attended by projection from Earth because Pepper could no longer tolerate interstellar travel. Azhara's migration crossed outside the station during the opening. Her 7 grown offspring traveled around her. The one with uneven fins led juveniles through a gentle current. Former chief handler Drosh stood beside the old control tower. I once believed skill gave me the right to decide what another creature should endure, he told the audience. The animal I called undisciplined understood the source of pain more clearly than I did. He opened the tower housing. It contained no parasite line. The internal chamber had been converted into a memorial for animals that died during 70 years of conditioning. The Covenant judge, older and moving slowly, placed the original trial tablet beside it. Pepper's claws appeared beneath the ancient text in equal size. No statue of Pepper stood in the hall. Cass had rejected 3 designs. Instead, the blue travel crate's first broken latch rested inside a small case with a simple description. A barrier opened from both sides. Pepper's current crate remained on Earth. During the ceremony, she woke beneath Cass's desk, accepted half an egg, and returned to sleep. Cass watched Azhara pass the station on the projection and rested one hand near the badger's gray head. The scale difference between them still seemed impossible. So did the fact that a warlord built an empire around a serpent's obedience and lost it when a small animal smelled the lie. After the gathering, a Varkan child sent Cass a question. If Pepper had attacked Azhara instead of the collar, would humanity have lost? Cass answered carefully. Perhaps the trial, not the right to resist invasion. No animal's mistake could surrender a world. That was the law they should have understood before entering the arena. The child replied that this made the old covenant seem foolish. Yes, Cass wrote. Some traditions survive because adults are embarrassed to admit a child can see the problem. The exchange entered the Academy's ethics archive. Earth used Pepper's share of documentary revenue for a conservation corridor linking fragmented honey badger habitat. Cass insisted the fund carry no heroic title. Local communities chose the name Open Ground. The corridor protected burrows, water routes, and the ordinary lives of animals that would never enter an alien arena. It also supported farmers who lost hives or poultry, because admiration without practical coexistence disappeared as soon as wildlife became inconvenient. Visitors arrived expecting every honey badger to behave like Pepper. Rangers taught them that species traits were not identical personalities. Some animals retreated from people. Some defended territory. One particularly cautious male avoided every monitoring camera for 3 years. "Is he less brave?" a student asked Cass. "He is alive on his own terms. Courage is not a performance owed to us." The phrase spread through rescue programs. Varka created its own open sky routes around the gas giant. Floating cities moved away from nursery currents. Sky herders monitored storms without enclosing migration paths. When serpents changed course, maps changed with them. Trade planners complained that unpredictable routes increased cost. The Federation paid the cost. For the first time, Serpent freedom appeared in a budget not as lost military value, but as a public responsibility. Cass kept one copy of that budget beside Pepper's medical records. The documents seemed unrelated until she remembered Vorak's challenge. He believed the galaxy could rank strength with one spectacle: Serpent against Badger, Empire against humanity. The years afterward proved strength lived in quieter choices: funding a corridor, moving a city, admitting uncertainty, letting an old animal rest. Pepper never understood the laws passed in her name. She understood open doors, familiar scents, the location of eggs, and whether Cass was near when pain woke her at night. That was enough for the animal. The rest was humanity's responsibility. Years passed. Years passed. Pepper's black fur silvered around the muzzle. She stopped digging the longest tunnels and began choosing sunny places near Cass's classroom. Students learned to step around her without disturbing sleep. On good days, she inspected training equipment. On bad days, she remained in the blue crate and accepted medication hidden inside eggs. She pretended not to notice. Cass never took her back into active danger. It was harder than the arena. When alarms sounded, Pepper still lifted her head. Cass would sit beside the open crate until Arya's team reported safely away. They waited together, no longer defined by being first through the door. One evening, a group of new recruits gathered outside the cabin after class. They had watched the old Hall of Conquest footage and arrived with the same question children always asked. Was Pepper really Earth's meanest animal? Cass looked toward the crate. Pepper was awake, chin resting on the edge. One ear turned toward the voices. "Mean is a human word," Cass said. People used it because she didn't retreat when they expected her to. But that wasn't the most important thing she did. "She destroyed the beacon," a recruit said. "Yes. She beat the Warlord. She bit his cables. His own choices beat him." Then what mattered most? Cass remembered black sand, Azhara's eye larger than Pepper's body, and the moment the badger ignored the giant jaws to follow the parasite scent. She noticed the serpent wasn't the enemy. The recruits grew quiet. Cass opened the crate's outer shade. Pepper walked into the evening at her own pace. The students remained behind the marked line. She smelled each field bag, chose one belonging to the recruit who asked the question, and began working at its latch. "Do we stop her?" he asked. "That depends." "What's inside?" "My lunch." "Then yes, quickly." The recruit reached the bag too late. Pepper removed a boiled egg and carried it beneath the cabin. Laughter followed her. Above the reserve, an open migration marker detected a Sky Guide call entering the solar system. It sent no command. It merely announced that Earth offered safe passage if the travelers wanted it. Azhara's descendants answered from beyond the moon. Pepper paused beneath the cabin. Her old ears caught nothing, but the ground carried the faint vibration. She placed one paw over the buried collar fragment, then continued eating. Cass sat on the step beside the battered blue crate. The recruits remained until the Sky Guide calls faded. No one asked to touch Pepper or see her perform a trick. They watched her finish the egg, inspect the empty shell, and return to the crate because she chose the softer bedding inside. The door stayed open. Cass thought of the first time she carried that crate into the Hall of Conquest. 10,000 witnesses had mistaken smallness for weakness and containment for ownership. Vorak saw a box and assumed the life inside belonged to whoever held the handle. Years had changed the handle, latch, and person carrying it. The most important fact had never changed. Pepper could come out. Beyond the moon, Azhara's descendants altered course toward Earth's safe passage. Some would use it. Others would continue along routes humans never mapped. The migration marker would record both answers without calling either disobedience. That quiet system represented more victory than Vorak's conquered banners. It protected freedom without demanding gratitude. It allowed powerful creatures to approach without turning their power into service. It allowed small creatures to refuse the role a ruler wrote for them. Pepper settled her chin on the crate threshold. Cass reached down but stopped before touching her. The badger lifted her head and pressed into the waiting hand. One more choice, ordinary and complete. The students eventually walked back toward their dormitory, speaking more softly than when they arrived. Cass heard one of them revise the question for another, not which animal was strongest, but which creature first recognized where the cruelty came from. The answer traveled with them into future missions, courtrooms, habitats, and worlds she would never visit. Pepper remained unaware that anyone had learned something. She yawned, turned once inside the crate, and rested beside the open door while distant serpents crossed the stars without chains. The warlord had demanded humanity send its meanest animal to prove which species deserved to rule. Humanity sent an animal too stubborn to accept the premise.